Welcome, everyone. The time is now 6:00 p.m. I call this meeting to order. Let the record show that we have 3 board members present in person and 2 present over the phone. I move to adopt the agenda. May I have a second, please?
I second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. All right, next we have executive session. Does anyone want to go into executive session? Hearing none, seeing none, then we'll move straight into our study session with the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee. Dr. Mendeville?
Thank you, President Garcia, members of the board who are present, and those who are listening at your homes or in the locations, Mr. Board Member Montero, Vice President Montero, rather, and then Member Hodge. You can hear me? Both of you? Okay, good deal. Member Hodge, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we're here tonight to review the recommendations from the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee. Mrs. Mielmans led that committee, along with a number of community members and stakeholders and employees of our district. So we're proud of the work that they've done. Without going into further detail of their work, I'm going to hand that over to Mrs. Mielmans.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville, President Garcia, members of the board. It's with great pleasure that I have this opportunity to be in front of you to give our Citizens Financial Advisory Committee recommendation to the governing board. So some information regarding, we met twice. We had a meeting on April 26th and then another meeting on May 17th. Dr. Mendeville was there to provide a welcome and state his appreciation for the committee to come together in regards to this important task. And then I did presenting of the financial information, and then Mr. Brown, the Director of Federal Programs, was there to present information in regard to the ESSER grants, the federal grants that we have received to do a variety of different things so that everybody understands the funding in regards to the district. This is a list of the people that participated. We had 38 community members, parents, staff members, different stakeholders that came together to learn about what the district was going to be requesting, and then also to give us input as far as what the community would believe that they could support. So this was the agenda that we went through with the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee, and this is what we're going to go through tonight, just to give you the information that was also given to the committee. So we did a welcome, we did the committee purpose. We'll talk a little bit about the timeline. We're going to go into information, financial information about the M&O override, the district additional assistance override, the bond request. Then we're going to talk a little bit information about tax rates. Brent's going to cover the ESSER grants so the community can understand what funding we received from the federal government. We're going to talk a little bit about past election results, the committee assignments that they were given, and then we'll go through some questions and answer opportunity, and then we'll go to what the actual recommendation is from the committee. So the purpose of the committee. The purpose is to examine the educational funding for the district, considering what our current proposed program offerings are, and recommend a course of action to the governing board. This recommendation tonight may or may not include a call for election for an M&O budget override, a district additional assistant override, and or a bond election. This initiative, based on what the recommendation is, should be one that can be strongly supported by our district communities. And so that was the purpose of the committee. So these were the dates that we met and the times. April 26th was our first meeting, May 17th was our second meeting, and then we were planning to bring our recommendation to the governing board last week, but now we are actually bringing it tonight, and then if the governing board approves the recommendation, then there would be a call for election also this evening. So let's talk a little bit about M&O. And some of this information you've already seen because this was information that was based on last fiscal year, so it was part of our annual financial report. And so you can see here the chart that shows basically our expenditures for last fiscal year by fund category. It shows that most of our, that we spent last fiscal year, $149 million. $92 million of that was through M&O, $6 million through capital, almost $8 million was debt service. Our classroom site fund was $7.5 million. Federal projects, state projects were almost $14 million. And then other funds were $21 million. And you can see down below, we've actually broken out the $21 million, where a majority of it came out of the school plant fund. And so you can see where 65% of our expenditures were out of M&O, and then the different other percentages of the other funds to get an idea of how we actually spent our dollars last fiscal year. So this slide shows specifically the $92 million that we spent in M&O, which is our maintenance and operation, which is really our operation funds that the district receives. And so you can see by looking at it, oh, am I on the wrong one? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I skipped it. The salaries and benefits are where a majority of our funding out of M&O goes towards. So 64% salaries, benefits 21%. So 85% of the $92 million went to specifically salaries and benefits. We did have 10% go towards purchase services, which include like tuition for private placements. It also includes contracted employees. We also, other areas where a large amount goes towards fuel for our buses, repairs, paper products, custodial products. All of that type of actually operating the district during the fiscal year comes out of this particular funding source. This is another way that we look at how we expend our money, and it's by function type. And so it shows where the amount of dollars that we spend towards instruction and instruction support. And so normally you look at those two combined, which instruction was 51.4%, instructional support was 12.7%, for a total of 64.1% was specifically used towards our students. Admin was 12.7%, maintenance was 15.7%, and then athletics 2.5%. When you're looking at the non-instructional dollars, that's broken out below in the small chart underneath, and you can see where pupil transportation is a large portion, 3.2 million of the 4.7 million. So the current M&O override that we currently have in place, we're showing the breakdown for the 5 years. So we're currently in year 4. And you can see when we, in November of 2017, when we went to our voters, we went from 10% to 15%. 15% is the highest amount that you can go to. We specifically told our voters that we were going to use that money for teacher compensation. But we didn't want to actually tax for the full 15%. We wanted to stagger it in so we had some new dollars every year to give to our teachers. And so you can see that in year 1, we only went for 12% of the override. And then year 2, we went up to 13, year 3, 14, and currently we're at the full 15%. And we'll also have the full 15% next year. And so you can see how the override amount has gone up. So this slide shows how we have expended the full 15%, because remember we had 10% that had originally been approved and then the additional 5. And so you will see as you look at the different functions that it was spent in, that 18-19 we spent 74% on instruction, almost 15% instructional support, almost 9% in maintenance, and then 2% in athletics for the full 100% of the override. And you'll see that over 1920, 2021, that the percentage in instruction went up and the percentages in the other areas went down. The number for 2020, for 21-22 is what we have budgeted this year and how we plan on spending the $12.7 million override. So this is a graph to show exactly what happened to our teacher salaries during that time compared to the state average. And so in 16-17, before the override, our average salary was under $57,000, and the state was at was around $48,000. And so you can see where once we started putting the money from the override, how our average teacher salary took a bigger jump than what the state average. Remember at the same time that the governor had his 2020 plan, so he had also given additional compensation towards teachers. And so, but you will see because of our community support, our average teacher salary went higher than what the state average did. So this is another slide that shows you where we were with our starting teacher salary at just under $39,000 in 17-18, and where it's at now at $47,934. So there was a 24% increase in the beginning teacher salary. And then you can see the middle teacher salary went up by 16%, and so did the top teacher salary, also went up by 16% during the time of the additional 5% override. I think it's important to show our community that we did what we told them that we were going to do. So this particular slide shows if we decide not to do an election, or if we do election and it's not passed, how it's going to impact the district. So for next fiscal year, we're projecting an override amount just under $13 million, and that will be at the full 15%. So if we don't go out for election, or if it doesn't pass, we have to start, it's stair-stepping down. So the override is, the way it's set up is that you get 5 years at 100%, and then you lose a third the 6th year, another third the 7th year, and then it goes away year 8 if it doesn't get passed or if the district decides not to go out for an election. So you can see in 23-24 that we would lose 5%, so we would go down to the 10%, so we would lose approximately $4.3 million out of our M&O budget. And then in year 7, again, $4.3 million, and then year 8, $4.3 million, to where the override would be completely gone. So this next slide kind of shows what our impact statement has been in the past in regards to the override, and really kind of just defines what we just previously talked about, that the override allows us to exceed the maintenance and operation budget limit by 15%. And that it gives us an additional $12.7 million currently. And these are some of the things that we've identified that we use the override monies for. We use it to have staff to maintain smaller class sizes. We use part of it for our core instructional programs, also for elective programs. We do student support services. We do preventive maintenance programs for our facilities. We have professional development. We do technology services for instructional and support purposes, athletics, and other extracurricular activities, along with co-curricular programs. And then, of course, the compensation package of our certified teaching staff. So that is the M&O override. Now let's go into the district additional assistance. So some people will remember that district additional assistance we used to call capital, and then the title got changed a number of years ago. And so this basically is items that we can use this money to purchase equipment type of items, land, buildings, improvements. We can do furniture, furnishings, athletic equipment. We can use this money to buy buses and other non-pupil transportation vehicles, textbooks, and other printed materials, instructional aids, library books. We can use it to pay principal and interest on bonds. I'm not aware of any district that's ever done that. And then also there's a clause in there that we can use it for emergency needs that are directly related to pupils. So currently we have an override that's been approved by our voters for $6.5 million. We have one more year left of that $6.5 million. This is how we've expended the funds. And so you can see in this graph that technology has been a big part of where we've put our district additional assistance dollars, along with books and instructional aids, buses, some site improvements. A lot of that has been done to do the security areas of our schools for the admin areas. Also, athletics and other areas. So you can see by the graph. This next slide basically shows you the same information, but it's just in a table. Sometimes that's a little bit easier to read. So this is through year 5, which was through last fiscal year. And so we've spent just under 32 million of the 32.5 million that we had taxed for through year 5. So this is what we're projecting that we're going to need as we move forward. Again, you will see that technology is a big part of it now that we've gone one-to-one with our students. That's 59.4% of that. That also includes things in the classroom, projectors, and different things that are needed that are technology, have a technology purpose. We have library books, textbooks, 8% of that, athletics at 6.5%, and then of course all the other areas. What you will notice that's not in here is buses. And so we have the option of either including that in bond or in the district additional assistance. We've done buses last time out of the district additional assistance, but this time we moved them to the bond. So again, this is another table that shows, again, what was in the graph that might be easier for people to read. So the 7-year total amount that we are looking at is just under 61 million, and it would be an annual amount of 8.7, which is a $2.2 million increase over what we currently have at the 6.5 million. So this slide, like I told the Citizens Financial Advisory, this is my favorite slide because it shows what the state has done to us during the cuts. And so back in fiscal year 2008, the amount of money that we received from the general fund was $562.62 per ADM, And then you can see where it was cut back each year significantly down to under $70 per pupil in 2018. And then now it's back up to what it was in fiscal year 2008. And so everybody's really excited that we're back to where we were in 2008. So that barely even purchases a computer. So yeah. When I actually sat down and I figured out how much money that we had lost over this year, just based on our current count, we lost almost $3,900 per pupil during this time. And if you take it just on the current ADM, that's $48 million. So this one here, this slide here shows that so the way that the district additional assistance works is that you can either set a dollar amount or you can go up to 10% of the revenue control limit. So right now, if our projected revenue control limit is $86,526,190, so our 10%, the most that we could actually tax would be $8,652,619. Based on our request, we're looking at $8.7 million a year. So it does fluctuate based on what the funding formula is, and so, but it will be the lesser of 8.7 million or 10%. The bond election. So these are some of the things district-wide that we were looking at. We're looking at some art room expenditures, auditoriums, updating our auditoriums, some cafeteria floors that need to be redone, curbs, some dugouts, fencing, locker room floors, restrooms, science labs, tennis courts, weatherization, and lighting. And these are just some of the projects. This is not an inclusive list of everything that's being requested. Just some pictures of some of the things that we're looking at correcting. You can see where there's some areas in the restrooms, there's some areas in the science labs where things need to be fixed. There's flooring issues. On this next slide, it shows again flooring issues, some of the locker room changes, specifically the auditoriums where the seating, locker room floors, stage floors. And then this one shows some of the things outside where the curbing needs to be fixed, some fencing, just some column stuff, the dugouts, some of the interior of the plumbing systems and HVAC systems. So this slide here shows the bond total expenditures by project type, where we're looking at lighting being a big one. It's 19% of the amount being requested. Instructional areas, which is the science labs, the auditoriums, updating the auditoriums is 11%. A little bit money in remodeling, walkways, roofing, flooring, student transportation, the buses, and then different other areas. This next slide again breaks it out by the actual expenditures and percentages in a table. So you can see where, like for instance, storage of 900,000, that includes actually replacing our fuel tanks for our buses back in the transportation area. Some of the other areas is the sports and areas, the athletic areas. That includes resurfacing our tennis courts, looking at resurfacing our tracks, also some outdoor volleyball courts. The management number there of $1,650,000, that's to hire a construction manager to assist with as we go through this, these projects. We found that that has significantly helped the management of that additional work. It also includes the cost of actually doing the bond sale, which right now is projected to be about $1 million. The building remodel includes locker rooms, and then also includes an area of remodeling in the transportation, the mechanics area, to allow the mechanics to actually get the buses in all the way and be able to get on top of them to do the work on the HVAC, on the air conditioning part of it. The instructional areas are mostly the science labs. As you know, we redid this science lab at McClintock High School, and that's been pretty much set our standard, and so now we would like to update the rest of the campuses. Again, the lighting is a big part of, and that's changing all of the lighting to LED throughout the district. A little bit has been done at some of the campuses, but it's also the interior and exterior lighting. And then we have built in a $4.6 million contingency for price increases and everything. And so the request is a full $100 million bond. This is a breakout by site, so that we show that it's pretty much even across the district as far as the sites. Again, when you look at the $11.8 million under the district office, that includes the buses, the storage tanks, the remodeling to transportation, and also some work in the chiller. When you're looking at all sites, that includes some work with the bleachers, but also includes the construction manager along with the contingency and actually the cost of issuing the bonds. Compadre is mostly just lighting. And then the rest of it is pretty even across the district. There's been some questions about why is McClintock lower than some of the others, but remember we did the science labs at McClintock, and also McClintock's auditorium has had some refurbishing done to it compared to the other sites. So tax rate information, because that's always important to our taxpayers. This particular slide shows where our tax rate is compared to all the other high school districts in Maricopa County. You can see we are the lowest of all the high school districts in Maricopa County. This next slide was information that the Citizens Financial Advisory Group asked for. They wanted to see where we were compared to other districts, and so we took Kyrene's tax rate and added ours in to get where it is for the taxpayers that live in the Kyrene portion of our district at $6.13, and Tempe Elementary, those individuals, $6.90. Scottsdale Unified is $3.46. Now, the thing to remember about Scottsdale Unified, they have a very high assessed value district. We're fortunate, we're very high too. Theirs is $6 billion, ours is $4 billion, and so that has a significant impact on how the tax rate is calculated. And we're also showing Gilbert's, Chandler's, and Mesa's. The things to remember about those three districts is that they do not have a DAA override. This slide shows what has happened to our primary and secondary tax rate over the last few fiscal years, going back to 2012-13 until now. You can see we hit our high point in 14-15 where we were over $3, just barely over $3, and now we are under $2.50. And this is our assessed value, and so you can see where we're very, very fortunate that we live in a high assessed value district, and so you can see where it dropped in 2013-14 and then has gone straight up since then, and will be, has even gone up more in 22-23. So this particular slide is the one where we predict what would happen to the tax rate if we went out for all three elections, and we won all three. And so you can see in 21-22 so the average home is projected to be just under 250,000. That's the amount that we're using for this particular slide. Now remember, this is not the market value of the homes. This is the assessed value, and assessed value is always less than the market value. So right now, our tax rate is 0.6035. So that, on that particular home, the total tax that they pay for the secondary tax rate, which is the voter approved amount, is $151. So next year, we're projecting that to go down to 148. Our assessed value is going to go up a little, so that's going to bring the tax rate down. But you can see in the bar graph where pretty much everything's pretty much staying the same, because what we're requesting won't impact next fiscal year. It would impact the following fiscal year. So you can see where the M&O override's going from $72 down to $71. The DAA override's $37 going down to $35. And basically the bond, because we have to repay the bonds now that for previous issuances, and that's $42. So then in 23-24, what we're doing is we're projecting that the tax rate will go up points to 0.7998, and that for that same value of home would be, they would pay taxes of $200, which is $52 higher than what they're currently, or what we're projecting that they will pay next fiscal year. So then you can, when you look at the bar graph, you can see like the M&O override, it would just be a continuance. And so it really has, it's going to go down a couple dollars, but it really has no impact on the tax rate. The DAA override, because we are asking for a little bit more, will go up slightly. But it's really the bonds that are taking it from $42 up to $85. And this slide is actually a slide that was put together by our financial advisor, and it's involved. It's a little bit more involved. But if you look at our existing bond debt, we have $71,410,000 of bonds that we still have to pay back from previous issuances. And then the plan would be for the $100 million is that we would do two separate issuances. We would do one for $50 million, and then we would do another $50 million 3 years later. So basically, when you sell your bonds, you really should, and you get that money in, then you basically should spend all those dollars within 3 years. And so in looking at it, it's much easier to program and do the improvements in two separate issuances versus selling the whole $100 million and trying to get that spent within the timeline. And so that's why we're presenting that we would do $50 million first, and then 3 years later we would do another $50 million. And so you can see that right now with the old bonds, it's about anywhere from 15 to 17 cents on the tax rate. The new bonds are going to do pretty much the same thing. They're going to add 15 to 17 cents. So that's why you see that it's going from, it's basically doubling based on what is happening to the taxpayer. But the total that we projected as on the last slide is $50 a year would be the difference, or $52 a year, so. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Brown. We felt it was really important that our community understand what it was that we received from the federal government and what we were using that money for, so that because there's going to be a lot of people out there that are thinking, well, they got all this money for the federal government, why do they need it from us? And so I will let Mr. Brown.
Good evening. The Tempe Union High School District applied for and received 4 general COVID relief funding grants. And we've been working on this for the last 18 months. And what I'm going to do is just give a brief overview of where we are with each of them. It was a requirement of the ESSER 3 grant to get feedback from our constituent groups and our community on how they would like us to spend these funding sources, most specifically ESSER 3. The Tempe Union High School did this by doing 2 things. The first was we organized a large diverse committee, and you can see the times that we met, the dates up there. Since the October 19th committee meeting that we held, we've communicated with the committee through email, giving them an update on where we are with each of the funding sources. The second way we complied with the federal requirements on gathering feedback was through our web page that we developed. And so we have a web page where we have described what the funding sources are with the COVID relief. And we also have on there some surveys to gather feedback from our teachers, students, from our community on how they would like us to see the funds used. So we used the information from the committee and from the website to create a budget and a priority of where we wanted to put those funds. The other thing that we had on the website is also a requirement for the ESSER 3 funding was the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. And we update that every 6 months based on our current COVID policies and what we're doing as a district, just to share with the community how we're being safe with the COVID. So just taking you quickly through the funding sources, the first one was ESSER 1. It had a starting date of March 13th of 2020, and it's good through September 30th of 2022. It was approximately $1 million, and what we decided to do with that is use that money to purchase student laptops with battery warranty for 1 year. This grant has already been expended, so that grant is over. The next one we received was ESSER 2. It had a starting date back in March of 2020, but it extends an extra year through September 30th of 2023. And that's quite a bit more. We received almost $4.4 million for that one. And it was decided that we would, and this was when we were deep into COVID, we would use 6 full-time employments to extend the school day for our students to get an extra hour of their day to take coursework. And we distribute that amongst all the schools. We also used it for some extra summer counseling days. So much credit was being taken throughout the summer and that. We brought some counselors in to continue doing credit checks and to making sure that the students were in the right courses to begin the 21-22 school year on the first day of school. And so that has concluded. And then the majority of the purchase from that budget is 2 more years of student laptops with internet upgrade. The first year we've already purchased. We're just finishing up the second year of this grant. And so basically this grant will run out here in the next few months, and that grant will be expended. So I'm going in the order of when we submitted these grants. So the next one is one that we don't often hear about, and it's the Education Plus Up grant, the EPU grant. That was finally awarded for us. Well, we applied for this long ago, but we finally got this, and that was $2.8 million. We used a portion of this to help our sites with contact tracing. So that's the 1.625 FTEs for COVID admin support. And one final year of student laptops with the wireless upgrades, and that'll be for the 23-24 school year. We also took out of this grant the Community Response and Intervention Liaison that's housed at Marcos de Niza. So that took care of the EPU grant, and we won't expend all of that until almost to the end date of the 2023 school year. The final grant was the big one, the ESSER 3. And it had a starting date of 2021 of June, and it goes an extra year than ESSER 2, and that expires May 31st of 2024. The committee, I think, did a fantastic job. We got great information back from our community of where they thought we should use our resources. The state also said that we did a fantastic job putting this application together, because it was a little different than some of our other school districts, because we spread that out amongst several groups. Majority of it being wraparound services for our students, but also paid some attention to our counselors. We paid attention to our staff. And this is a pretty good list of what is currently in the grant. The grant is flexible. We do revisions on this from time to time as needed. We're going through one right now. But you can see there that we're using it to reduce class sizes. We're using it for hard to fill areas, some curriculum for Success University, some tutoring, recruitment stipends for hard to fill areas. Some of these will begin in the fall. Some already began, like the increase in tribal support. We started that in January of this last semester, where we moved our part-time Indian Ed assistant to full-time to do house visits, home visits, and other support. It's a pretty good list of strategies, activities, programs that we feel will make the biggest impact in our district. Some of the expenses are going to be with our prevention counselors, Care 7. The goal is to have 2 on every campus, and I believe we're almost there with that. 2 extra behavioral interventionists for our special ed department, so we have 1 on every campus. And then 6 more behavioral interventionists for the gen ed population, 1 at each of our campuses. That just started here a couple of months ago with one of our schools. The rest of the behavioral interventionists will be starting in the fall. PBIS program with at least 3 of our schools. I know Mr. Ron Denny is working with the schools on that. We paid for our Panorama social emotional screener out of this funding source. A big chunk of it, though, is our summer education. 3 summers of having our students, allowing our students to come and get caught up in their work at no charge to them. So this will offset the costs that our families traditionally had to pay for. We provided some support, emotional support for our staff through a Calm app, and that was through our Banner Aetna insurance company that we currently use. I think the only one I might have missed is the third one, counselor to student ratios. Even though our district is very low compared to the state, we put a little extra in there to get our student to counselor ratio to 400 to 1 or less. And so well below the state average, but we felt like during the pandemic, the extra supports would be needed. And that's it on the COVID relief funding.
Thank you, Brent. Oops, sorry about that. This particular slide here basically shows our previous election results. And the way I like to look at it is going from the bottom up. And so you look at 2007, which was a special election that we had 2 questions on for our M&O override and our capital override. And that was the first election that failed in our district. And so that's when the following year we created the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee, and which has worked extremely well for us since then. And so you can see that in 2008 we actually took 3 questions and they all passed, even though that was a tough economic time for our families and everyone. We were very fortunate that our community supported. So then you can see that in 2012, we did a bond election, and then we actually were going up to a 15% override. The 15% failed, but the bond election passed. And so the following year, we went back at 10%, and that passed. Then in 2015, our DAA override passed at 6.5 million. 2016, we did a special election to do a sale lease exchange of the property that we own. That passed. And then 2017, where we went back out for the M&O override at 15%, and then that passed. So then we had an opportunity for the committee to ask us questions, and we then gave them the assignment to go out and talk to their neighbors and other people that they have influence over, and to find out what their thoughts were in regards to whether they felt that the community would support us in the 3 areas that we gave them information on. They came back and we gave them some additional information that they had requested, and then we basically talked about each of the different areas, and they came back and said that we should go out for all 3 questions. And so that is the information that we have to share tonight. Are there any questions or?
Thank you, Mrs. Mewins. And thank you to the committee for all of that work. I know this has been a long time in the works, and it's not easy, especially with so many moving and changing variables all the time, and greatly appreciated. So board members, what we'll do is we'll start off with questions or comments from the folks on the phone first, and then we'll move to in-person, and then cycle back if needed. So for right now, we'll start off with Member Hodge. Member Hodge, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I have comments. I just want to say first off, thank you so much, Diane and Brett. I've been a part of your overrides and bonds since 2008, so, and I trust the process. So, and thank the committee. I missed the last meeting, was out of town, but I did make the first one. And I just want to say thank you. And I know that I trust the work that you did. That's it.
Thank you, Member Hodge. All right, Vice President Montero.
Thank you. First, just want to thank you, Diane, for all your work and all of my committee. The only question that I'm wondering if there is any discussion with the committee on the impact of inflation recently, national fiscal impact, as well as kind of what that discussion might look like in the community as we look to the November election and moving forward.
Vice President Montano, do you mind repeating the question, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you repeat it one more time, please?
Yeah, so the only question that I had was just in terms of the impact of inflation. I don't know if that was discussed at all during the committee of, is there any concerns in terms of any discussion within the community or what, what impact that might have in discussion around the impact of the election moving towards November?
Sorry, no.
I think part of it is the impact that the committee may have seen that they discovered when they spoke to their constituents and those with whom they have influence in their neighborhoods and that kind of a thing. What impact that would have, or was there any consideration for impact that the committee discovered?
So the comments that we received back from the committee members basically were that, yes, that there was a slight tax increase, that they felt that would be acceptable, but there needed to be some messaging in regards to that. There was also some different comments made specifically about the messaging, about how when, the PAC gets together and decides to do their work, on how each community around the schools, how it would be beneficial for them to hear specifically how the bond and the override impacts their particular school. But a lot of the information was just, how is this going to be messaged to the voters and the community? Right. What would happen if it passed? What would happen if it did not pass? And how that would be communicated out.
Thank you. Member Breza?
Thank you for the presentation and being very thorough. I know the community will appreciate it. Also, it was great to be a part of the committee. It was my first time being a part of a process, with the bonds, overrides, and so very fascinating. I really love how it very much is a community effort. Everyone from across our districts sitting together, having this discussion. It's wonderful to see that process play out. I also want to thank that you included the slides that were of concern of 35, starting at slide 35, where you and your team put in Kyrene plus Tempe Union, the tax rate, to see how it's going to affect with, since our district is so broad, that the tax isn't going to be, just equal across, the playing fields with each city and town. So I appreciate that, and I encourage the community to look at it, and if they have any questions, but to contact you and your team. And slide 38, I love that you put into the projected of the total tax and putting it across the years and showing that for the average household income at $250, it's increased by 2023-24 years by $50, to their, so from 151 our current rate to 200 by 23-24. I appreciate that. So that way it shows kind of the distribution of, what it's going to affect us in terms of their tax rate. The only, question, I have a few, and I'll reach out to you for the more profound, in-depth ones, but I'd say, let's see, looking at, just to get a visual, slide 31, just shows that our contingency is put at 4.6. Is that kind of our standard for our bonds? I know that inflationary, when we talk about our construction projects, it's astronomical right now. I go to Lowe's, Home Depot, and a 10-foot ABS pipe, 1.5 inch used to be $5. It's 18. That's drainage pipe. There's a lot of electrical wire. They lock it up, and you have to have the employee unlock it now. It's very, the prices have increased. Do we need to consider our contingency to be increased based off of what we may look at in terms of inflationary or maybe our supply chain management aspects for these projects?
Well, we believe that there was some of that included as we had the projects priced out, because we did consult with our different architects and engineers in regards to pricing these different projects out. I don't know how you figure out what a true contingency would be based on what's happening right now and what may be happening, a year from now or 2 years from now. And so we basically use the contingency just to get up to the full 100 million.
I appreciate that. It's just that knowing especially that the engineers and, all of the maintenance operations aspects has been obviously considered that throughout the past year, that has been something that I'm sure you guys are very well versed into. So thank you. I just wanted to ask that question for the community.
Thank you, Member Braza. Member James?
Yes, thank you. This is just one thing I noticed, and I wanted to check in on the slide 20. There is a dedicated category for music and instruments, but on the projected needs for fiscal year 2023, there's nothing specific for musical instruments there. Is that going to be lumped into something else? I'm just thinking in terms of, we did a big assessment of our fine arts programs and have a coordinator, and we are going to see some significant needs, I think, with instrument repairs and replacements. So I'm wondering if those are in another category, if that's something that is coming from a different funding source or what.
Some of that information is in, let me get to the right slide. The instructional equipment of 2.3 million, that's where the fine arts, musical instruments and things are included in. There is some other instructional equipment, but that's a big majority of the 2.3 million.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Member James. So I have a quick question regarding to the total for the bond expenditures by site. I know you touched on this with respect to McClintock and it being lower, and that makes sense. Just looking at what we've already invested at McClintock. However, I am curious as to if we had not made the improvements already, what would that percentage be like? If you, by chance, know on the top of your head.
Well, the science labs alone were over $4 million. And then the auditorium remodeling that had been completed when Mrs. Hilgers was the principal over there was several $1 million also. So my guess would be it would be at least $6 million higher than what it is showing right now as 10 million.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Member James?
You had mentioned that there's also room for other projects. It was just kind of, you had a list of the things we want to tackle. And one of the things that I think we've had conversations about is the state of the libraries. And I've spent some time over at Marcos, and the new librarian there is phenomenal, and he's done so many great things and is in desperate need of some remodeling. And I know that's actually across the board. Our libraries need some attention. So is that something that we are going to be able to focus our attention on, to some of the library upgrades?
That's not specifically in the bond request, but there is funding in the district additional assistance for building improvements and remodeling. And then there's also the funding source that we received directly from the state regarding the $562.62 per pupil that we get. So there are other funding sources to take other work out of other than just what's specifically here in the bond.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing to see what Mr. Owen Jones is doing over there, and just to be able to support our librarians and those spaces and really make sure that they're, as lively as he's making them, and that it reflects that effort and the appreciation that I think the staff and the students have for him. And I know that's across the board. I know we have so many wonderful librarians in our district, and so I'd love to see that focus in the next few years too.
Remember, James, some of that will fall under flooring and different things of that nature as well. So when you're looking at the bond, we're looking at flooring. I know that project pretty well. Looking to redo carpet and things of that nature, what falls into that category.
Great, thank you.
All right. And board members, any other thoughts, comments, or questions? Member Braza?
Yes, looking at slide 15, just looking at if no election is called or passed, looking at that type of scenario. Looks like in year 6, we take the override decreases from 15 to 10, which is a net negative of 4.3 million. And then year 7, another decrease of 5, bringing it from 10 down to 5 for another negative of 4.3 million. Is that stacked from the previous year? So let's say, we took 10% away, and that's 4.3. And then so the following year, would that mean it's 8? Because that's my assumption, is we're going from 10 to 5 and then eventually 0. So we're really looking at somewhere around 15 ultimately by year 8. Is that, if we don't go for that?
Right, it would be
Yeah.
just, based on our current override, it would just be under $13 million that we would have to cut out of our M&O budget over the 3 years as a stair-step down.
I appreciate that, you mentioning that. I just want the community to understand what we can actually do with that dollar amount in terms of our projects for preventative maintenance, equipment, teaching and learning. A lot of assets and a lot of our projects really depend on the support of the community. And so thank you for mentioning that, because I think it's going to be invaluable, with conversations moving forward. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Braza. I just want to say a quick thank you to Sean McDonald for answering all the questions that we have relating to all of our school sites and projects and all that good stuff. And then also a quick shout out to Principal Arroyo from McClintock, because of the science wing advocacy that we desperately needed, and now is being used as a model for all of our schools. So just, thank you for that. Aside from that, I don't have anything else. Dr. Mendenville, anything you'd like to add? No? All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Viewmans. All right, we will recess this meeting for 5 minutes, so we'll reconvene at 7:07 p.m. Thank you. in this meeting. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. McDonald, followed by a moment of silence for those lives that have lost from Buffalo, Uvalde, and Tulsa, and then a Latin acknowledgement led by Member Braza. If we can please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Thank you.
The Tempe Union High School District acknowledges that our community of schools is located on the ancestral lands of the Akmoatam and Peepash indigenous people who have been inhabiting these lands since time immemorial. With this land acknowledgement, the district formally recognizes that the traditional care and keeping of these lands by indigenous peoples allows us to be here today.
Thank you so much, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Peraza. Next, we'll go straight into the report from the superintendent, Dr. Mendeville.
Thank you, President Garcia, Vice President Montero. We can hear you now. That's good. Member Hodge, we can hear you, I believe. And board members who are present, those who are visiting with us online, and those who are present in our audience, we're glad to have you here this evening. We have some special guests. It's nice to see our students even when the school's out. So thank you for taking the time during your summer break for some of you. But I'm going to introduce a couple of people. Members of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission presenting the Youth Town Hall Report. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Adrian Casio, who can properly introduce our folks. And Adrian's with the Tempe Human Services Department for Education, Families, and Youth Development, and serves as advisor to the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. We're so proud of our partnership working with you and that department, and we enjoy all the work that you do with us, and we rely on you, so thank you for being here this evening. You want to call your folks up? Up to the podium, yep.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville. Again, my name is Adrian Casio, and I'm the advisor for the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission. This is my fourth year serving as the advisor, and we have the pleasure to report out to the school board and to all of you in regards to our youth town hall for this year, 2022. So it's my pleasure to introduce three of our chair members from the Youth Commission. We have Sean Washington, who is our chair from Tempe High, Sophia Perano, who is our vice chair from McClintock High School, and Rucha Sate, who was our project management chair from Corona del Sol. And so all of them have been serving with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission either 1 to 3 years. Two of our commissioners are graduating from the commission, and so I will let them get started and talk about highlights from the Youth Town Hall, some suggestions, recommendations that they have for the school board to consider. We've already presented to City Council last month with specific recommendations for City Council. So some of these recommendations and input is more regarding the for the school. And we also have what's known as our action plan that has much more detailed information, student input from students from Tempe Union High School District. So we hope if you find time to delve into that and see the input that your students have provided. So I'll get you started.
Good evening, board. Like as mentioned before, my name is Sean Washington, and I am the chairperson for MIAC. So just a little bit of backstory. We were established in 1980 as a way for you to respond to diverse challenges around. And this year we had a commission of students from Corona del Sol, Marcus Deniza, McClintock, and Tempe High. And we are commissioned up to 30 from members from 9th to 12th grade.
This year we held our 41st annual Youth Town Hall. This year's event was held virtually on Tuesday, February 24th of this year. We would like to thank the Escalante Community Center for providing a space for MIAC commissioners to convene in person to host Youth Town Hall. And we'd like to thank the following schools for participating in this year's Youth Town Hall: Tempe High, Corona del Sol, and Desert Vista. This year's Youth Town Hall topics were diversity, equity and inclusion, emotional and mental wellness, and environmental sustainability. My commissioners chose to focus on these topics because we thought they reflected youth priorities and the priorities of our commissioners. Through a virtual format at Youth Town Hall, MIAC utilized breakout rooms to conduct groups on each topic and collected students' feedback. We know that some students may feel more comfortable sharing anonymously or in written format, for which we provided a Google form for all students to use. The Google survey also contained questions regarding each topic area, which we were able to use to provide data that is presented in the action plan and within this presentation. Thirdly, we worked with City of Tempe staff to have them share their expertise and provide guidance to MIAC facilitators. Lastly, we had a panel of decision makers that could speak on a policy level about topics and answer questions from students. We'd also like to thank Dr. Mendeville and Mr. Ron Denis for participating in the panel.
So our first subcommittee, as well as the subcommittee that I was lucky enough to be a part of, was diversity, equity, and inclusion. The focus that we chose to have this year was microaggressions at school, the workplace, and in the community. The way we address this is giving everyone kind of an opportunity to discuss and recognize microaggressions that have occurred, as well as kind of more broadly defining what microaggressions are and how they often look in our everyday lives. The subcommittee explored microaggressions in multiple contexts, and particularly with interactions with police officers as well. For some more specifics on what that looks like, 83% of our surveyed respondents said that they had experienced microaggressions, and 20% said that they had experienced microaggressions many times. So this is clearly something that's prevalent and an issue that definitely needs to be a focus going forward. So going off of that, we have a couple of strategies that we'd like to recommend. These are kind of our school recommendations, right, for you guys. We would like to continue to implement policies and strategies that make the City of Tempe youth serving programs a safe place for all of our students. Our three major strategies are firstly increasing training for staff to help them identify and avoid different types of microaggressions. We'd also like to include questions and satisfaction surveys that address microaggressions. And then lastly, create an anonymous system for students to report microaggressions they experience in school. All of these we believe will be very beneficial towards making this space safe going forward. Thank you.
Another one of our subcommittees was emotional and mental wellness. The focus and goal of this subcommittee is to increase awareness and availability of mental health resources for youth, and to identify what barriers are currently preventing students from accessing these services, and lastly, what can be done to improve these services. At Youth Town Hall, we gathered lots of student feedback, and one piece of data we'd like to highlight is that when students were asked if they felt comfortable talking to school staff when stressed, only 50% of students agreed or strongly agreed. MIAC's board recommendation is to improve the quantity and quality of mental health resources on school campuses. Some strategies MIAC has identified are to increase the number of counselors and youth specialists at each school, to allow students to provide anonymous feedback and increase training for staff to help improve service quality, and to invite youth to serve on interview panels for youth specialists and counselors. MIAC would also like to appreciate the increase in youth specialists from our 2020 recommendation.
And our last subcommittee was environmental sustainability, and our focus was just to basically focus on the ways that the city is currently addressing and how we are, as a school board, are addressing different, are addressing just environmental sustainability and on our campuses and around just Tempe in general. And so some of our student feedback said that they really recognized and appreciated how much shade and how much vegetation we had, but we really would improve and have a positive feedback on the school boards. And it would have a positive impact having all that vegetation around just to give us some shade, as well as allowing access to affordable bus passes and giving that transportation out to the youth through schools and different counselors. And so our board recommendation was just to establish schools and community gardens to increase the amount of vegetation in public spaces.
So looking towards what the end goal of all of this should be, right, our anticipated impacts for recognizing and working on each of these different areas would overall be to increase positive youth engagement. We want to make sure that our students in Tempe, right, are being heard, they know that they're being heard and they're being listened to. We want to make sure that they're able to like positively participate and engage with not only the school board, but the school district as a whole. So that is our overall kind of anticipated impact of these recommendations. Thank you. We'd also like to say a massive thank you to the school board as well as the district for your continued support of MIAC and for making these like opportunities possible to us. We're incredibly thankful for all of the work that you do and all the work you'll do in the future as well. Thank you so much.
I will tell you, all three of you, your recommendations are spot on. And I want to make sure that our coordinator of diversity and you know, with Ron Denny and all our support resources and individuals within the wraparound supports that we have as a district, that we incorporate those brilliant suggestions and recommendations too. So we will take that not into just consideration, much of which will go into practice, some of which already is. So spot on. I'm so proud of all three of you. And you too, Adrian.
Thank you, Dr. Mandeville. Really, a lot of credit to the students here for conducting the focus groups. And what we do hope is that, you know, these suggestions are something that, you know, doesn't stop here, but allow for further conversations. And, you know, we've already noticed, I've had Dr. Cliff Moon reach out to me in regards to some feedback from the school, from youth town halls. So any opportunities like that for us to continue these conversations, we greatly appreciate. And my apologies, Ms. Rippey, for the format of the PowerPoint. I should have sent a PDF for you, but thank you all. Appreciate your time.
No, and thank you. I'm super excited and thankful that you all you know, contributed and were empowered to share your own perspectives and to also just kind of get the feedback from your peers. I'm curious though, what was your key takeaway throughout this entire process for you individually?
All right, so I guess I'll speak first. I joined MIAC when I was in 8th grade from my social studies teacher at FEES, Mr. Stropshire. And at first, I was actually like on a probationary period. I showed up at the first meeting, and Adrian took me to the side. I was like, "Oh, you're not supposed to be here yet. You're not actually here." I was like, "Oh, okay." So despite that, I kept coming, and I was officially made a member of MIAC. And the whole experience has just been really uplifting to me. Really kept me out of trouble, just making sure I had somewhere to go. And I knew like very close friends of mine now over the past couple of years. I know I have people I could reach out to if push comes to shove and I'm going through something, I need something. I know that I have genuine people who care for me. And knowing that I'm not alone, knowing that I have other youth who feel as strongly and I don't look like, oh, Debbie Downer when I'm trying to say do better, it's just real nice. So that's my main takeaway.
Thank you, Sajah.
I'd say my main takeaway is how much of an impact students can actually have, because a lot of times there aren't many outlets for youth to raise their voices and actually be heard. And being able to speak to the city board and the school board, it really shows you that you can actually really make a difference. And it was a great outlet for me to stand up and do something that I believe in. Yeah. So I'd have to say that after 3 years on MIAC, my biggest takeaway is more a takeaway not only about MIAC, but about the city of Tempe as a whole. I think that coming into this, I was really excited for an opportunity to meet other people who really cared about what was going on in our city and in our school district, and that's absolutely what I got. But not only that, I saw that we have an entire community here, especially of young people who are really, really interested in making things better in the future, of seeing like the great work that's already being done be built on. So I think my biggest takeaway has been that we really do have a community in Tempe, Arizona, who is more than willing to put in the work to make the next generations have a great experience in this city, and really to see things improve and to see things, do better, like Sean said. So I think that was my takeaway. Thank you.
No, I love it. I love all of them. Thank you. And Adrian, thank you for your work in all this and empowering them. Do you have anything that you would like to reflect on or share with us at all? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I just had one thought and maybe something to look forward to based on a lot of conversations that I've had with the MIAC commissioners, which we have 28 currently right now. One of the things that for ourselves to improve in engaging all of your students is we've talked about maybe conducting the very much smaller versions of a youth town hall, more like focus groups on campuses, where we know we can reach a lot more students. With Youth Town Hall, it's this one event where we're somewhat limited how many students. Typically, it's been 10 students from each campus, and we know it's a lot of coordination. A shout out to the activities principals, the teachers, and the counselors who identify the students, and in the past when we've done this in person, they found a way to bus students, which I greatly appreciate. And what we would like to do is, so we can provide more equitable opportunities as well, is be able to meet students who we know may have difficulty coming to an event, but still want to be part of the decision-making process and have their input shared. So that's something we hope that we, in coordinating again with the activities principals and some of the faculty, how we can do smaller events on campuses, and ultimately maybe do another type of event that'll bring students together. Our last in-person event was in 2020. We got it right in just before the pandemic in February, and it was such an amazing event. It's always great to see all the students and the teachers that come in. It's a great opportunity where I see students interested in MIAC if they've never been, had any exposure. And I get so many students who've been part of Youth Town Hall. Some of them are behind me before they were in MIAC, do a Youth Town Hall, and then the next year they want to be civically engaged and give back to the community. So we have things that we are looking forward to. And so again, we appreciate the continued support with the school district and all the school campuses.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adrian. Very thoughtful, and I appreciate your recommendations, and I know we'll be looking into them. Thank you. Member James?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's so wonderful, and I love that you all reflected on the voice that you have and you want to share, and I think that's one of the best parts of sitting on a board is seeing the students and what y'all can do. It's phenomenal. But with the sustainability piece, we did just commit to having sustainability officers in our student councils. And so that might be something to sit down and coordinate with. We're working with the city of Phoenix, and I know we're going to be coordinating with Tempe but it's really exciting to see what the sustainability officers can bring to our student councils and to our student body in general. So just to keep that, put that in your ear and see what wonderful things we can do, because these recommendations are phenomenal. And like Dr. Mendable said, these are things that are part of our core values as a district. So thank you so much for being here and presenting this to us.
Thank you, Member James. Member Braza.
Wonderful presentation, and please convey to the entire committee how wonderful of the work and effort they put into bringing these approaches, for the district. It's very important to hear from our student population, our youth that will be coming into Tempe Union. I know the committee consists of various student ages. Definitely, the one thing I would say is just continue conversating with Tempe Union, and you guys already have a great foundation for that relationship. They hear you. They want you to be a part of this growth that they're working on. I know a lot of what you guys mentioned they're working on, and I know they would love to have, all of you a part of that growth and building those programs. That's how you gain value, and how you really appreciate something so much more when we could build it together. So please continue the conversations. Don't stop that. I think that's the next step, is just for you, bringing you all into the fold, into all those different conversations pertaining to your goals. Wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Braza. Member Hodge.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you guys so much. I promised them that I would be there and see them the next time I saw them, because I saw you at City Council. I saw you at the City Council meeting. I apologize I'm not there in person, but I'm just as proud because I heard your speech the first time, and I'll tell you guys, you got even better the second time. So congratulations on that. Adrian, I just want to say one thing. I love your idea about having it at each campus. One thing I would ask you guys is to think about, when you decide to do it at each campus, maybe go to each club on campus and get their presidents to be involved in it. You'll grab more people that way, because each club have their own passion and they can bring their perception to it. That's just a thought to add the club presidents or someone in the club that can help, circle that around at each school with you. So I just thought about that, the different clubs around. And ladies, I can't wait to see what you guys do next. I am so proud. Adrian, thank you for the picture. I just sent it off to my superintendent so you can see how beautiful those ladies look on the day when they did their presentation at City Council. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Member Hodge. Vice President Montero.
Thank you. I heard your comment. I'm glad you got the picture from our last City Council presentation.
Yes, I did. I got it. You sent it to me in email, and I sent it off. So I'm just proud to have that picture.
Thank you, Member Hodge. Vice President Montero.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Just want to echo what everyone else said, and thank you guys so much for coming. And I really want to emphasize the point and making sure that we continue these conversations. And I really love the idea of having those individual site-based meetings and making sure that, we have that authentic engagement with our students and really make this an integral part of our decision-making processes in the years to come. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Vice President Montero. All right, Dr. Mendenville.
No other than I echo the thank yous and the appreciation, but just to say that there's nothing from the recommendations that I can't see happening. So we need to work through, devil's in the details, right? So we'll be working through some of that, because it's all wonderful recommendations, and I said that earlier. So kudos to all of you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good night. All right. Next on the agenda, we have public comment. However, this is for public comments that are not identified with a specific item on the agenda. Do we have any of those?
No, we don't.
No, okay. So we do have public comment, but they are for specific items on the agenda, and we will have those read first when we come up on those items. And then they will give you an opportunity to do so, and then we will go into the item itself. So next we have consent agenda items 1 through 15. I move approval of items G1 through 15. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Got to give the opportunity. All right, motion passes 5-0. Next, we have Business Services H1, 2022-2023 Budget Advisory Committee recommendation. And this is for discussion, information, presentation. This is not yet the vote. We will come to that later in new business. But for right now, Dr. Mendeville.
Thank you, President Garcia, Vice President Montero, members of the board who are here and at home, Member Hodge, those of you in attendance, executive team members. I'm going to invite Mrs. Mielmans back because she will be presenting the bulk of the information from the Budget Advisory Committee recommendations. The committee has met a number of times, and she'll go over those details and determining what revenue we have for the upcoming school year and the best use based on community stakeholder input from that committee group, which she will explain, and then the recommendations that they will be making to me later on in the presentation. Mrs. Mielmans.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville, President Garcia, members of the board. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here to present the Budget Advisory Committee's recommendations for next school year. So first of all, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the purpose of the Budget Advisory Committee. Basically, the committee is to ensure that there's a transparent process for the budget development that involves representation from community members and employee organizations, as well as those staff members that don't represent associations. This team acts independently in advising the superintendent before any budget recommendations are made to the governing board. This is the makeup of the Budget Advisory Committee. We have 2 community members that are on the Budget Advisory Committee. We also have 3 classified employees. Normally we have 4, but there was 1 position that wasn't filled. And then we also have 4 certified members. And then we have an individual that represents our assistant principals, along with our a principal that sits in, and then a number of the executive team. This was this year's meetings. We started meeting in November, talking about the budget and looking at what has been recommended in the past, and started some different conversations about what we were going to look at as far as the budget was concerned. We sent out a request to our principals and our assistant superintendents and different groups to come to us with their budget requests in regards to M&O. We also discussed like the governor's budget and what else was happening at the legislature. As you're aware, the legislature has not come forward with an approved budget yet. So this is recommendations based on what is known currently. So let's talk a little bit about our projected revenue. So based on our total weighted student count compared to last year, our student count is down. And so based on that and looking at the funding formula, because of that decrease in ADM, that was a loss of $328,000. The base support level change, which is going to be for inflation at 2%. As you know, we're limited to the lesser of inflation, or at 2% is the limit. They won't give us more at this current time, more than 2%, unless the legislature overrules that. But that is giving us an additional $1.6 million. The teacher experience index, because we have a very experienced teacher population, that index did go up, and that has given us an additional $700,000 based on the funding formula. There was a gifted additional weight that was given to us this year, and that gives us almost $30,000. Along with the M&O override, as the RCL changed, we are getting an additional almost $300,000 because of the change in the funding formula. And then this last item, basically what this is we went in and we looked at our budget as far as where it currently is at compared to what our expenditures and what people are actually spending in the budget. So when we went into that, there's two kinds of things that contribute to a carryover, and that's ongoing budget capacity, and then there's also one-time budget capacity. So what we wanted to do was we went into every single code, we looked at the number of positions that were budgeted for, made sure that even if they were vacant positions, that they were included in the calculations to ensure, okay, where exactly are we in regards to what we have as ongoing budget capacity and what is it that we're actually budgeted for. When we went in there and did that, each line item, and we have thousands and thousands of budget codes, we identified that there was an additional $2.6 million worth of budget capacity that could be used towards expenditures, ongoing expenditures. We also identified that there were certain departments where they had budget, but in the last 3 years that they had not spent all of that budget. So that we also moved some of that around. We also identified that there were some departments that actually needed more budget capacity because they had been overspending their budgets for the last several years. So we went in and adjusted those. But after all those adjustments were made, we found $2.6 million that we could contribute towards this year's budget recommendations. So that gave us gave us a total of $4.9 million to work with as we started our budget discussions. So, of course, there are certain things that had already been committed that we needed to take into account. And so this year, the retirement contribution for the employer went down. It went from 12.41% to 12.17%. So that did create an additional $140,000 of capacity for us to use. I would not expect that to happen next year, but we'll take advantage of it this year. Our medical insurance went up, and so that slight increase of 3% is costing us $261,000. We, this year, because of the change in the calendar for our employees, where we now have a professional development day after fall break and spring break, we realized that we had other employee groups that needed 2 additional days in order for them to come before school started to do the work that they need to do. So that is $83,000 to give those staff members those 2 additional days. And then, of course, we have the fine arts coordinator at $125,000 and the Tempe Union online coordinator at $124,000. So we have known budget commitments for these items of $454,000. So one of the first things that we started discussing is what are we going to do for salaries? As you know, inflation is very high this year. We know that the dollars that our employees are making aren't covering all their expenses. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to make some good recommendations in regards to salaries. And so you will see here where we are recommending that our classified, non-exempt, our classified hourly staff get a step. That's $603,000. Our professional exempt employees get a step at $69,000. Our administrators that are on the administrative schedule get $131,000 as a cost to the step. The teachers that qualify for a step is a cost at $577,000. Then these next two are actually dollars that are new dollars that we are, oh, no, sorry. The next one is our instructional student support step at $72,409. The next two, as we talk about this is actually new money that's being put on their salary schedule. All the rest that we're recommending is just step movement. So let's talk about our classified hourly. We are recommending that we put $2 on every cell of the classified hourly staff. That comes to a total of $2.2 million. What it does is it gives our lowest paid employees anywhere from a 14% to a 5% increase. And so what that is doing, as we've talked to our consultant, is we had, 2 years ago, we had talked about our compensation study that we had done, and we had predicted that in 2023, that we would get our classified staff up to 57%. This is moving our classified from 60 to 70% percentile. And so we're very excited that we are able to do that for our lowest paid employees. The next item is actually putting $2,000 on each cell for our instructional support staff. So that includes our social workers, our nurses, our psychologists, our OTs, our PTs. And so this is brand new money that will go on each cell. So they will get an additional $2,000 compared to what it currently is. Plus, if they qualify for a step, they'll get that on top of that. So between the funding from the M&O for these items of $3.7 million and additional funding for the instructional support out of other funding sources of $104, this is a total of $3.8 million that we are recommending to go on to for compensation for our employees. This next list are things that were requested through the budget advisory from different departments for positions and for stipends. So an administrative assistant position was requested for the director of safety along with the social, emotional, and diversity inclusion coordinators. This was a position that we had several years ago that was cut. And so we are recommending that it go back into the budget at $75,000. There was also a request for a district daytime surveillance position. This is a position that will be at Compadre that will be watching cameras at all of the sites in specific areas to identify if there are any issues or concerns. Then they'll be able to then contact the site to let them know that they see something going on. But we have nighttime surveillance people, but this would be a daytime surveillance person. The next item is Dean of Students. We currently have 3 Dean of Students at our southern campuses. This is to place those positions at our 3 northern campuses at a total of $283,000. Mr. Brown made the biggest request of all and requested an ELL support assistant that's costing them no budget $1,243, and grant support of $3,728. Our online program needs assistance with keeping records, and so they've requested a records data clerk. This position would be a 6-month position. It's more for the Summer Education Academy, and so it would be a position that is basically second semester from January and through June. And so this is a cost at $36,000 and would be coming out of community schools funding. The request came in to make our security officers from 9 months to 9.5 months so that we're able to do professional development with them. And so this amount here is for 8 additional days. They are also included in the previous commitment where we've, so that they have the 2 additional days, so for a total of 10 days. And so 191,000 of that will come out of M&O, and 36,000 of that will come out of under other funding. And then Safe Talk trainer stipends, which is the mandatory suicide training that needs to be done, is at request for 14 district staff to get stipends, and that's a cost of $25,000. So this request in total with the M&O and other funding is for $703,000. So as you look at specifically at the M&O, our projected revenue is $4.9 million. The budget commitments were $454,671. Salary increases of just a little over $3.7 million, and position stipend request of $626,000 leaves us a contingency basically of $128,000. So we're not done yet. So we are making some recommendations regarding use of some of the carryover dollars that we have in our classroom site fund and also in our M&O fund. And these are one-time funding sources that are available. And so we are recommending what we did last year, that that for employees that are top of the salary schedule that would not be getting step increases, that they get a one-time $1,000 stipend. And that comes out to $6,000, just a little over $6,000. And then for our teacher and student support schedules that are also at the top of the salary schedule, that we get a $1,000 stipend, and that comes to a total of $328,000. Again, we're recommending what we recommended last year, that for the employees that are getting step movement, but it doesn't come to a total of $1,000, that we will make that up. And so that it does equal $1,000. So if step movement is only $750, we're going to give them a stipend of $250 so that they're also getting $1,000. And so that's a total of $28,000 to do that. Then we are recommending a recruitment and retention stipend for all employees of $3,000. For our teachers and instructional support, that'll come from the classroom site fund. For the other employee groups, administration, professional exempt, and classified hourly, that will come out of M&O. And so this recommendation for stipends from the classroom site fund is just a little over $3 million. Out of M&O, $2.2 million, for a total of $5,281,249. So then one of the other recommendations that we have is that currently our IP for our teachers is $4,000. We are recommending that that be placed on each cell of the teacher's salary schedule. And so that's just a little over $3,118,000. We're also recommending that go on to the student services coordinator's salary schedule, and that's a total of $28,000. And so that's a total of $3,147,640. This is money that they currently get through the IPIP. These are the two salary schedules for those employees that are part of that plan. Basically, what we're doing is we're recommending to discontinue the current IPIP program that we have and have it be reflected into these salary schedules. That does not mean that there will not be an IPIP program for next year. It just means that it will be a smaller program. Dr. Keller will be working with the appropriate teaching staff to come up with what that will be, but it will definitely mean that it will be less work. It will probably be more it will be more related to data, and but it will meet the criteria that is required for an IPIP program. So what does this do to the salary schedules, comparing our minimum and maximum teacher salaries to our competitors? So you can see that Chandler's minimum is $50,205, max is $86,765. You can see Mesa's at $50,000 up to $69,975. Phoenix Union's at $49,000 up to $88,809. Queen Creek, $49,000 up to $80,000 is their top. And Tempe Union is at $51,934 up to the top of $91,090. So that's what the 4,000 does. So as the Budget Advisory Committee, and this was a unanimous recommendation, that we recommend that the superintendent accept our recommendations. Also, as another slide just to show you that, again, this year, in the current fiscal year for 21-22, that the IPI amount will be remaining at the $4,000. Are there any questions?
All right, board members, we're going to start off in the same format as we did earlier, so we can accommodate folks who are on the phone. So we'll start with Member Hodge, then with Vice President Montano, and then we'll head over back here. Member Hodge.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions for Diane. Thank you so much for all your work, and also thank the Budget Committee. I know how hard that is to do for all the recommendations. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hodge. Vice President Montano.
Just want to echo that and say thank you for all your work throughout this process. I had a couple quick questions. The first of which, given that we don't have a budget yet from the legislature, and there's a lot of talk about, different amount of money that we might get, given that we have to approve this budget relatively soon, I was kind of wondering what we have in place to kind of account for some of these changes coming forward and what that timeline might look like.
So in our, since we're not sure what the legislature is doing in regards to their budget recommendations and whether there's going to be restricted dollars or unrestricted dollars, was kind of decided that we would just wait to see what it is that the legislature does recommend, and if there's new money in there for education, then we'll bring the Budget Advisory Committee back together then and deal with that and make a different, or possibly make another recommendation to the governing board and to the superintendent.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Montano. Member Braza.
Thank you for the presentation. So I just, first off, I really appreciate the hard work. This is a lot, to really have to crunch down and try to work within the constraints of all the budgets and the legislature. So, thank you for always, being the one and your committee on top of it. I guess maybe this is more for Dr. Mendeville, but I do know whether we have such an emphasis of trying to catch up students or push them, ahead. And parapros are very important. Does that fall under this in terms of the instruction student support cells on slide 7 for 2,000 each, or maybe Dr. Medeville, you can just kind of give me a rundown on what we're doing in terms of parapros, or maybe we can have that discussion if it's more lengthier.
No, that's a good question, but I want to refer that to Mrs. Muellman's. My initial response is yes, they're part of because they're non-exempt or exempt, I forget.
They are non-exempt, so
They're
they're part of the hourly, and so they are one of the
Groups
lower
that-
paid hourly, so they're, just the amount that we're putting on the cell is giving them
$2.
close to it, yeah, $2, so it's close to a 14%. Plus, then they will also get the $3,000 retention and recruitment stipend and all the employees. And so for our classified employees, this recommendation is very nice. And I want to state that the Budget Advisory Committee as a whole was very supportive of the money going to the classified staff. So the teachers, the administrators, the community members are very proud of this recommendation and what it's doing for our classified employee group.
And the other important item too is that $2 is ongoing.
Correct.
The $3,000 is one time, but the $2 is ongoing for that employee group. So that's what we're proud of. And thank you, teachers. I want to say that publicly, all our certified staff who are going to bat for their colleagues at the classified level, who provide that support for them and the work that they do with our students. So I appreciate that immensely.
Wonderfully well said. Thank you, Dr. Medeville, for mentioning that. And for also mentioning that, Diane, that is something to be very proud of and very, very excited about that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Member Braza. Member James?
Yes, thank you for this work. And I really appreciate the bump to the classified schedule as well. And I really appreciate that our district is prioritizing that. I have a couple of questions. First, I'll kind of go backwards on my notes. It's slide 11, the IPIP. So that's being added to the cells. The $4,000 is going to be added to steps. Does that include like our school psychologists and social workers? Are they going to get a $4,000 increase on their steps as well?
No, they're getting the $2,000 that we're putting on to theirs. Yes, the $4,000 they're not part of our current IPIP program, so these are the only employees that currently get the $4,000.
Okay, because I remember that was a question that had been asked as to how we can include like our school social workers in the IPIP, and I was wondering, and I thought that's more of a question for you, Mary, if we've been able to incorporate them into the IPIP so they will be in the future eligible for that.
Yeah, under the current law, they are eligible now, and we'll be working to determine what that's going to look like. It will be a reduced version of what they're currently doing, but we'll be looking at our IPIP and who should be included and what will be required for that.
Okay, so
Yep.
do you foresee that the social workers will be included? Yeah.
I think so, because that's now money we can use for them. It's a matter of how we're going to handle all of that.
Okay, all right, thank you, I appreciate that. And then when is this $3,000 stipend going to be paid to staff? Is that going to be broken up between the semesters?
That is correct.
Okay.
We had a lengthy discussion with the group, and we are looking at doing $1,500 at the end of first semester and another $1,500 at the end of second semester.
Excellent, thank you. And then I was confused about the ELL support because it's so minor. It's what, like $5,000, but that was slide 8, I believe. ELL support assistant. So what is that going to entail for?
Yeah, we're just extending extra days, and this is one of the lower paid positions, but the increases would be included in the step increase and then also in the $2 per hour, as that was calculated for all employees. So this is just above that.
And is that a position that could potentially be expanded? Because I know that's a big job that you've carried, Mr. Brown, and have done a lot of good things, but knowing with the restrictions that ELL has in Arizona, your job is that much harder, and our graduation rate with our EL students is significantly lower than the average of Tempe Union, with it 60% for ELL students, 90% for the non-ELL students. So just wondering if you foresee that maybe even being expanded further and what that might entail.
It's possible if needed, but right now our EL population has grown, and the current 9-month position that our ELL specialist has right now, she's not able to do the work because her contract ended or ends on graduation. She doesn't come back until 3 days prior to the beginning of the school year. So what this does is it extends her position, or this position, to be here an extra 3 weeks after school is out to do all the paperwork, go into Synergy, and complete all the tasks that are required by the state, but also brings that position back prior to the first day of school to do all the required placement testing, Azella testing, to get the kids in the right class on the first day of school. So it's a low amount of M&O, but you can see she's paid for out of 2 different funding sources, a title account and M&O. So that's why the M&O portion looks so small, is because of how she's paid from 2 different accounts.
Great,
So.
thank you for advocating for that. And it would be great in future budgets to continue to push for more support for ELL, because I know, and being lumped in with all the federal programs, I know you have such a huge job, so I really appreciate you, Mr. Brown, and everything you're doing. And then the security guards, I'm glad to see that we're increasing their position to 9.5 months. I feel like there is a common theme this year with bathrooms on our campuses and access to bathrooms. I mean, graduation speeches even included lack of access to bathrooms, and I'm hearing that's a security issue. Like, we just don't have the people to monitor bathrooms and, what's happening, the things that are going on in the restrooms and causing them to have to be locked. So is there any way we can hire more security guards? Is that something we're looking at? Or like really defining that job to put them on a higher pay scale to make it more attractive? I mean, what are the things that we can do? Because it just seems crazy that our kids can't go to the bathroom when they need to very easily.
I was not aware of that issue, so I'm going to let Dr. Mandeville or Mr. McDonald answer that.
I appreciate the advocacy for additional security officers. However, at this stage of the game, I don't know that that's the solution. I think we discussed actually this morning around in our meeting with the executive directors, and all of our site administrative teams that we're looking more on a proactive approach with our 7 correlates through Larry Lizotte, that one of the correlates that we're emphasizing is a safe and orderly school environment. Part of that is that we understand that we began the year with a great struggle, thinking it was going to be a few weeks to a month with our students, and it ended up being a total semester, if not more, in trying to get them to return back to, how their job is as a student. So we're going to focus on routines and procedures and practicing them, being consistent with them, and being clear across all 6 schools. We're going that route first. Because I know our kids can do better than that. We haven't had this level of challenge with restrooms in prior years, to my knowledge. And I think what's happened is that they started that way, and some of that behavior has just been a residual impact into the 2nd semester. So we need to get control of the behavior. And I know our students can be better than that. So that's what we're shooting for.
Okay, we all know it's been an issue, so I don't know if we could, I guess, keep tabs on that, but
we
if
will.
I know we will, it's just really, obviously it snowballs into tardies and losing instructional time and more bathrooms being locked. It's kind of chaotic, so those were just my observations, but thank you for everything. It's really well done, as usual. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The budget is always my favorite time of year, just because it shows where our values are and what we're prioritizing and how we break things down for our staff, for our students, for the community at large. So thank you for all that hard work you put in, and as well as the committee. I know in years past, I certainly haven't been too easy on y'all and been the critical eye to things, but I really appreciate it a lot. Some of the things that I wanted to highlight and thank y'all for and recognize specifically, because I feel like not many places do this in particular, but for us as a district, as an employer to cover medical expenses that from our end to cover, because I know especially now that we have kind of a more inclined insight as to our own health and what that looks like for us. So I just want to thank us for recognizing that in our employer portion to it, as well as the advocacy around the Fine Arts Coordinator. I know that has been a long time coming with a lot of folks involved, and we wouldn't be able to be a top district without folks that constantly do this advocacy. So I wanted to thank y'all for that, as well as the Tempe Union Online Coordinator, because we are now in an online competition in terms of a education provider online and retaining as many students as we can. So I like seeing the investment there. One of the things too is being grateful for the contributions to the classified schedule. This is particularly important for me because I, as many folks know, come from a family that have only been warehouse workers, sanitation workers, field workers, what have you. And so didn't always get recognized, right? And so seeing this is really meaningful. And I know that Member Ross and I have, and Member Hodge have done advocacy in years past with respect to this budget to get them on par and honor the work that they do because they are an integral part of our district. So thank you for all of that work from you and from the committee. I do have a question, and I brought this up to Dr. Mendeville during our board prep, but I am curious as to, I know we've covered at least the, 2% inflation for the base support level change versus the projected incremental revenues, but I'm curious with respect, particularly with our classified schedule, for our lowest paid worker, are any of them at or below the poverty line?
No, not based on the federal guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
For a family of one, no, we have nobody that's below the poverty level.
Okay, have we done further analysis beyond a family of one?
No.
No, okay, because generally speaking, classified end up being not necessarily a family of one, but kind of a range. When y'all have one, I'd love to see if we can do an analysis on that so we can kind of have a better picture on what that looks like.
Thank you, President Garcia. Just so that I am clear, when we say a family of one, you're just counting our employee, obviously.
Correct.
That employee could have a spouse or other family members or living in the household, a roommate, all those different, real scenarios. So we would need to conduct a survey, if Dr. Lexick was here, but Mrs. Hilgers, you're listening to this, that we would conduct a survey to understand household occupancy, who's in those households. And so that may be a little challenging, but we'll figure something out to get some more additional information.
No, that's helpful. And even if it's generalized with the census data, granted, that is not at all accurate when it comes to having an idea, but it does kind of give us some insight into that if we don't have any additional. But I just want to be mindful of that because I never want to have anyone who works for us be at or below the poverty line, whether themselves or with respect to their family, just because Tempe Union is a great place to attend, work, and live in this area. And so I want to make sure that we're able to accommodate as many folks as possible. In addition to building on Member James's recommendations on ELL, but beyond that, thank you all so much. I don't know if board members, you have any other thoughts, comments, or questions. I don't see any lights here or any one on the phone. All right, hearing none, seeing none. Dr. Mendeville, would you like to add anything else?
No, I'm just appreciative of the comprehensive and transparent process that our Budget Advisory Committee has done with this work and the recommendation, and as it is agendized in a later item, I'm gladly accepting the recommendation. So their hard work is always noteworthy. I also want to remind those listening and here that should we have additional information from the legislature that provides us additional resources, we will resume the Budget Advisory Committee and determine how will be the best use of those additional funds. That does not preclude us from moving forward with our budget adoption process, because there's a time frame that we have to be accommodating and make sure that we're in compliance with those dates.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mendeville. Thank you so much, Ms. Bumans. All right, next we will go straight into new business. I-1, resolution to order and call a special election for the Tempe Union High School District M&O override, the DAA, the District Additional Assistance, and the bond. And we do have a public comment for this item.
We're going to call Beth Brazil.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville, President Garcia, the governing board, staff, administration. I was on the Citizen Advisory Committee, and Mrs. Mullins did an excellent presentation, as you all saw in the study session, for a 2-day presentation, and really answered everybody's questions and made it for us all to see, and we did unanimous, that we would like to have you guys go for the question for all three, for the M&O, for the bond, and the DNA. It's very important that all three get passed, and it's going to be very important because of the questions people were asking in the committee, that we really make our community understand how important all three are. And sometimes it's really easy to understand the money going to salaries. Other times it's not as easy wondering why one is going to have to go to a school. The school, why would they need this? Why do they need that? So it's going to be very important that we get our message out there. But I'm here to ask you to support that and take our recommendation and go for all three in order to keep our students, our schools safe, our property values high, as well as keeping Tempe Union an A+ school district. So I'm asking you to consider and vote yes on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And before we move forward, I just want to bring a clarifying point with the sample ballot that's listed as there is an item, actually it's the first bullet, that says construction of school buildings. We're not going to be constructing any new school buildings, so that will be a simple fix on that, but it is listed as a sample ballot. So the sample ballot that is actually going to be the final product that our public sees will not have that particular bullet on it. I just wanted to make that real clear for everyone.
All right, board members, any thoughts, comments, or questions on this item before we take a vote? Hearing none, seeing none here. Member Hodge or Vice President Montero?
No.
All right. So at this time, I move that the governing board adopt resolution ordering and calling a special bond election to be held in and for the district, and authorize the Assistant Superintendent for Business Services to comply with certain sections of the Internal Revenue Code. I also move that the governing board adopt a resolution ordering and calling a special district additional assistance override election and a special maintenance and operation budget override election to be held in and for the district, and declare the deadline for submitting arguments, quote, for and quote against the district additional assistance and M&O elections to the Maricopa County School Superintendent as August 12, 2022 at 5:00 p.m.
I second it.
Thank you so much, Member Hodge. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, passes 5-0. All right. Well, that concludes item I1. We will be moving forward with all three questions on the election. Next, we have I2, proposed 3-year student calendars, and we do have a number of public comments as well. Dr. Mendeville.
Thank you. We have two. May I call Makia White? Did I pronounce that correctly? Makaya, sorry.
Thank you for bearing with us this late.
Hello, Superintendent and board members. My name is Makaya White, and I am a Tempe Union High School District parent. I grew up in Tempe, and I attended McClintock High School. I'm here today to ask that you vote no on approving the change to the current calendar from a 1-2-1 calendar to a 2-2-2 calendar. It is not in the best interest of our students, teachers, or parents to change the current calendar to a 2-2-2, and you should not approve it for 13 reasons. The Tempe Union High School District families all voted to keep the current 1-2-1 schedule and not adopt the 2-2-2, and we should honor what our families want for our students because they felt that it was best. The Tri-District committee was not made up of any students or parents, and there should be a separate committee to present information to the district that shows the disadvantages to changing the calendar to a 2-2-2. 3, there is no evidence that has been given that shows where Tempe Union High School District students have suffered in a summer slide. 4, most of the students' parents come from a generation where school had a 3-month summer vacation, and these families are very intelligent people who have gone on to graduate from college and be very prosperous. So suggesting that the longer our students are on summer vacation, they lose information is not valid. In fact, there is contradictory evidence that shows the shorter a student's summer is, the less likely they are to succeed or have to struggle more to be successful. 5, after being in school for 9 months, students need adequate time to regroup and get prepared for the next school year. We have already shortened the summer from 12 weeks to 10 weeks, and now a change to the calendar would shorten their summer to 7 weeks, which is not adequate time to regroup and get prepared for the next school year and be successful in the next school year. 6, the district as well as families will suffer a greater cost in changing to a 2-2 calendar, which are because of increased teacher pay, childcare expenses, hiring of additional staff, and building and maintenance costs because school is in session longer in a 2-2-2 school year. 7, my best friend is a teacher, and they have stated that it would be a detriment to teachers and students if the calendar was changed to a 2-2-2 because they need the time during the summer to regroup, spend time with their family, and set up for the next school year. 8, students who want to work to help their families or just save money for themselves will not have adequate time to work with a shorter summer. 9, the time being added to the fall and spring break is 5 days and not enough time to identify students who need more help. The help should be happening throughout the whole year. 10, our students lose their freedom and chance to be a kid if they lose their summer. 11, less time spent with their families and friends over the summer. And 12, our family schedule must change three different times during the year, which is significant time changes. Lastly,
You can keep going.
the last one is, please board, keep the current 1-2-1 calendar with one exception. We should add the one extra day, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, that is being proposed for change. Thank you.
Next, we're asking Kaisa Holman to come forward. Kaisa.
So my name is Kesa, and I'm a student at the Tempe Union High School District. I don't think it's a good idea to change the calendar schedule from a 1-2-1 to a 2-2-2 calendar because last year we had a short summer, and it's a good example of why we shouldn't change it. Students, including myself, feel like this year was a very long year because of having a short summer. It stressed many students out as well as teachers. All of my teachers told me that they wish that they had a longer summer so they could relax and not stress out as much as they did. Many of my classmates also told me that they had good grades or straight A's like me, but it was very hard to maintain those grades when we had a longer year the year before, and this year we started earlier than usual. I feel like having a longer fall and spring break will bring down grades and students will not focus as well as they could rather than having more time in the summer to prepare for the current year. In the summer, students and teachers need about 3 weeks to buy school supplies and prepare lessons, and students need to get back in the schedule of waking up early for the new school year and also buying school supplies. Having a long summer is better for everyone because students and teachers want to visit family who might be in another state or even another country, which is why students, teachers, and families need a 10-week summer rather than a 7 or 8-week summer. Spending 9+ months in a school is a lot for teachers and students, so having a longer summer with 10 weeks helps a lot to be able to relax from being in school for that long. So those 2 or 3 weeks that we're missing makes a difference because everyone waits for the summer to be able to relax. And most people don't really care about the fall or spring break. Summer matters the most because it's a long break from school and everyone is able to relax and have a good time. These are the reasons why the calendar should not change to a 2-2-2 calendar and should remain a 1-2-1 calendar. Thank you.
That's the conclusion of public comment for that item.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville. All right. Is there anything you would like to add on this item, Dr. Mendeville?
No, Dr. Keller, do you want to respond or say anything in addition before we recommend action? Okay.
I don't really have anything additional than what we did when we discussed it the last time.
Okay.
Unless you have questions.
Board members, any thoughts, comments, or questions? Okay, I do have, because this is agendized, want to, I don't remember all the 13 points, but I was trying to keep track of them. But one of them in particular too, with respect to where the other districts, the status on the calendars for their, so I believe Irene has passed theirs. Do you know the status on Tempe?
I believe Tempe is passing theirs next week.
Kyrene passed theirs.
Last week.
And in fact, I wouldn't doubt if Tempe's meeting tonight.
Oh, okay.
That was my thought. I can find out for you.
Yeah, I was trying to bring up their agenda, and I don't think it's on their agenda for tonight. They had a study session for today.
Yeah, I think, okay.
Yeah, the work of the committee, all the tri-district committee came together, as you all know, for a tri-district recommendation. And so with Kyrene approving their calendars, and we need to be in sync with that. So the administration will continue to recommend that the board approve the 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26 student calendars as submitted.
Thanks so much. Member Braza?
Yes, we've had the presentation and a lot of the questions I appreciate and the concerns from the community. They raised, some very good concerns. Just teacher prep, for that time period. What does it mean for summer school and alignment and so forth? So all I ask is if the board approve this calendar tonight, that we continue to convey to the community all our dates, and we keep doing that almost overwhelmingly, just because I know that the alignment and the communication is going to be honestly the biggest concern. So moving forward, if the board does approve it, I would just say yes, maybe we can continue to have some type of avenue for community input, students, teachers, and so forth with you and with your team. That's all.
And thank you, Member Barraza. The nice thing too is that we are giving our families a whole year in advance with the calendar, so that we can be rethinking in ways in which we can listen to some of the concerns that some of our families have, but also how can we respond to them in a manner that would be appropriate. Our districts, I mean, I'm thankful and happy that today that we're working on something as a tri-district partnership, since we share many of the families. And I know in speaking with our teachers and our employees that this is something they've been wanting. I've been here 11 years now. They've been wanting to explore, and you know, I think this is a great opportunity where 3 of our districts have come together with this information, and we will keep our eyes and be aware of every aspect of the implementation of this calendar proposal.
I appreciate that, and also for that year, for the refinement of that calendar, and to be able to communicate and work with the community and staff regarding those concerns. I know that as we move forward, we'll definitely have some, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member President. Member James?
Yes, I'm too old to have done the year-round calendar at Tempe High, but my sisters and my husband both did. And when it was introduced, I remember graduating and going, oh my gosh, I dodged that bullet. I was not into it at all. But then I saw my now husband going through that, my friends that were younger, and my sisters, and it was a really positive experience. So I sympathize with the hesitancy around it, because I think that's normal with change. And I do believe, as you stated, Member Braza, that as a district, we do need to listen to our families, our students, and see where we may need to make some refinements. But understanding the way in which we're using those 2 weeks, if our staff does choose to do some sort of intercession course for their students, they'll get a week of compensation. Students will get a week of remediation or acceleration, whatever it may be. And there will still be a week that we're all used to having, that 1 week off. And I know that in talking with Mayor Molina in Guadalupe, she said that her students were much more successful. They had that intercession opportunity at Tempe High, and they did see significant changes in their academic success. So I do support this calendar and appreciate the recommendation of the Tri-District Committee. But I also appreciate your comment about involving the families and making sure students are asked the questions and involved in the conversation. So thank you for bringing that point up, and that we will continue to do that. And then we had talked briefly about the spring holiday that we have. It's on the Good Friday, and we are keeping that in. I think Tempe Elementary is keeping that Friday off, but Kyrene and Tempe Union are not. Did we have more conversation about that?
Yeah, we did. And there's Dr. Keller, can you respond to that? Because it was so close and tied to the week of that final week of the spring break, that it was a day out right away.
The first year we're doing this, it would have been the Friday as we returned from spring break, so that we'd be here 3 days. So it was determined. In the other years, it's only like a couple weeks after spring break, so there's not much of a gap in 24, 25, 25, 26. So there's really, the concern was there would be a huge gap from when we had it in spring break. So the gaps aren't as big as it appears like it would be this year, for example, because we had a late Easter. So we did not.
Guess my question, with Tempe L keeping the Good Friday holiday, we're not, I'm just wondering why they chose that. And I'm also concerned because I am old enough to have been hired by Tempe Union many years ago, and they did get rid of that Good Friday when I first started. I remember vividly being like, oh, we don't have that off. And I don't know when it transitioned back to having that as our spring holiday, when that may have happened, but it has been tried before. And I know that we, as a district, we do have a lot of families that will be celebrating that holiday, will be absent teachers that will be taking days, even, and you can't really put a blackout day on a religious holiday, right? Like you have to give that exemption. So how flexible might we be if we do decide that we could, we might want to join Tempe in reinstating that holiday? Is there flexibility to do so? Because like I know our kids in Guadalupe, Holy Week in general is huge, and Good Friday is that culmination, where we're going to be missing a good chunk of kids.
People still can take the day. I realize that part of it was having to do with counts and equaling semesters out and quarters out, and that, became an influence to that. We've not done this before. Kyrene has not done this before. So we agreed we would take that day because we also gave to teachers a day to have a planning day after every break. So we had to give a little bit of concessions when we did that, and that was something that the two of our districts felt that we could do in order to be able to do those kinds of things as well. So we also have to have a certain number of student days. It came down to a certain number of student days, and are you going to be, how far after Memorial Day do you want to get for us to have finals and graduation? So it was a myriad of things that basically came into play as to we felt that that day could be basically moved to the day before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. Everybody felt that was a popular thing that the districts that didn't have it should have. So there's a lot of different factors that came into why we had to do that. And it's not just as easy as saying, let's put it back, because it will affect other things.
Right, okay. Yeah, just thought I'd check in. Thank you.
However, I'm not opposed as we look at into next year, and we need to talk to our teachers if that's truly, after surveying them, if it's truly a consideration to return that day back. We have to take the day from somewhere else, though. So I'm not opposed to having those conversations next year.
We would have to take a day from somewhere else.
Exactly. So.
And
no, we're not doing that. No.
The committee has had lots of discussions like this, Mr. Adams, and we've gone round and round and back and forth.
My point is, though, everyone, that we will have time to look at that, okay?
This is a planning year coming up for a lot of things. I mean, payroll's impacted, pay and things like that, days. So there's a lot of, I'm not going to use the word negotiations because that's not what it was. It was discussions and determining what we could and couldn't do. So we certainly, during our planning this year, can look at that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the work, because I know you put a lot of energy and effort and thought into this, and I think it's going to be really positive. So thank you.
Thank you, Member James. All right, Vice President Montero.
Thank you. Just wanted to follow up on that real quick and ask if it would be possible during a board meeting during this year of implementation, just to get a quick update on how things are going throughout the process.
Of course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Montero. Member Hodge, would you like to add anything?
No, just want to say thank you. I did hear what the community said, but I'm also happy that we're going to be in line with our feeder districts. It's very important, especially for our families who need the high school students when they, for babysitting or just to make sure that they're all in line when they have vacations or whatever. So just thank you for all that work that's been done, and I'm just happy that all three districts are going to pass it.
Thank you, Member Hodge. Really quick question. By chance, were we able to get the breakdown in the survey results per the school community for the proposed calendars?
Dr. Keller?
By chance?
I don't have the details that you've asked for. That doesn't mean I've given up trying to figure out how we can get those. And so I will continue to pursue that, because I know you wanted to see some demographic data and some other things.
And those are housed with Kyrene.
Kyrene has that data.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you so much. All right. At this time, if there are no additional questions, comments, okay. Then I move approval of I-2. May I have a second, please?
I second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Next, we go into new business I-3, Superintendent's second semester goal, fiscal year 2021 to 2022. Dr. Mendeville.
Thank you, President Garcia, Vice President Montero, members of the board, executive team members. I mentioned that one of my goal priorities would be to study and review what we've been doing with the academic labs in our district, and that's what this presentation, why isn't it working? I knew she would have the magic touch. I want to recognize first Dr. Wilson and a few others who provided information on an ongoing kind of checking in with our school sites, but more importantly, our teacher think tank, and these are members that I want to recognize when we went to them to ask for information and to get down to some of the nitty gritty of some of the questioning that we have, that I had. So an overview, we're going to look at the purpose, the available data that we had, how the academic labs functioned, challenges and opportunities, discussions with our teacher leaders and principals, and then some next step recommendations. Looking at the definition that the academic world looks to, as naturally I did the same, and that is that the labs are designed to provide specific time for our students to address homework issues and get extra help, looking at study and organizational skills, and find ways where we can provide the support so they have greater success in their classrooms. That's essentially what the academic lab, if we use that term and that name, to help them out. So I want to be real clear on that. It's been very interesting that the actual definition is helping kids out for their homework and just giving them that extra assistance. And when we look at the lab in our district, we're using it for a variety of things. Makeups, tutoring, our college visits and FAFSA completion efforts, finishing assignments, the social, emotional, and mindfulness. We've mentioned homework, an AVID connection, all the work that goes into AVID, counseling, the ACT prep, organizational skills, study skills, enrichments. We don't want to forget that, because those kids who are moving on and need that extra time to move forward. And then student surveys. And this is just some, but it's not an exhausted list of how the lab is being used and the time during the day that the lab is functioning with students. So the anecdotal data, the logistical challenges that in discussions with teachers and different team leaders and department leaders, the MTSS groups, the logistical challenges with the intended design for the lab time to be tier 2 interventions. And I'll share the tier 1, 2, and 3 definitions just to remind us all. Random surveys to teachers, reassessment practices with standards-based mindset. So again, affording the students an opportunity to retake a test. Observations. Hard data was not available, and I'll explain why. So let's go back to the tier 1 interventions. Tier 1 is instruction in the core areas, your English, language, arts, math, sciences. And we're held accountable to the state content standards. But students who receive tier 1 instruction but do not meet the set learning objectives or those targets should be receiving small group supplemental interventions. That's tier 1. Small group supplemental interventions. Tier 1 interventions really should be happening within the instructional period of the class. Research-based programs and strategies and content areas are used by our teachers when they have the time to do that. Core curriculum is aligned to the state standards. And again, these are best practices, and there's differentiated instructional strategies. You don't just reteach it the same exact way, you find a different way to reach the students when they don't understand it that first time, which involves sound instructional techniques. Positive behavioral support. Sometimes within those tier interventions, if you have those positive behavioral supports, you'd be surprised what efforts and how a student can blossom. Lessons on study skills, organizational skills, and motivational strategies. And culturally and linguistically diverse content for learners and enrichment opportunities. These tier 1 interventions, that's the bag of tricks that teachers have and have to master, and it's difficult, it's complicated, but when it's done properly, it can really have an impact with our students. So how have the academic labs function in Tempe Union at our sites? Well, guess what? The intention for the labs was in the right direction. We actually have been doing, if you look at the raw definition of the purpose and behind an academic lab, we've been doing exactly what we've said we should be doing. Support to students who took advantage of the time. Targeted social emotional support for students. Focused tutoring opportunities for those students and for those teachers with those students. And the enrichments. So this is a good thing. We've been using the labs, and I remember having a conversation with Board President Garcia about that with, that time just to finish homework or to take a test or, and I needed that reminder that extra time, especially for a high school student, is important. That little extra time can make a big, big difference in their day and how they progress with their academic classes. So I remember I talked to you about the tiered supports. So the core instructional interventions for Tier 1, all students, preventative and proactive, happening within the classroom period. Tier 2 is targeted group intervention. Some students at risk, there's high efficiency and rapid response. In order for that specific intervention to be successful for students. For some students, it's very targeted, very specific. And Tier 3 is intensive. Individual students, assessment-based, high intensity, and longer duration. What we have learned too is that we've really refined our Tier 3 interventions with students. I've seen a marked improvement with that and how we've targeted and been even more successful with students having that intensive intervention. The targeted Tier 2, a little harder and a little harder with the Tier 1. So the challenges with some of those difficulties, they were different for every school, as you might imagine. The unstructured movement of students. What that means is if the academic lab time was not tied to a class, there was opportunity for students to be moving within their campuses, some having to travel a greater distance and some just around the other hallway. But it was unstructured time that students began to experience some behavior issues, as you might imagine. The challenge too that about 25%, and this is from our teacher group, that about 25% of the students really benefited from the time when they were in the lab. So they weren't able to reach all the students as they wanted to. It was difficult for teachers to align learning targets with activities, kind of tying it to the target, to the Tier 2. Difficult to provide their Tier 2. And the days varied from 1 day at some schools to 4 days to another school. Tracking students. Some schools used a Google document to try to track students. Some did much better with one day. I'll give Corona as an example. Others, it was very difficult for teachers to track their students and the work, the specific work that they were supposed to be doing within those academic lab periods, which made it difficult to hold students accountable. Attendance was an issue. Some students stayed in a class or often did not attend the lab, compounding pressure for students, and they fell further behind if they continued in the lab and didn't take advantage of some of the tutoring. I don't want to fault students so much there, nor the teachers, because I think we set up a situation that was probably difficult to achieve anyway. But students failing or struggling with more than one class. And it's a collective responsibility for all students and their learning. We all are responsible to make sure that that happens. But the opportunities and successes, they were different for each school as well. Our teachers realize the quality intervention time is needed. So they see the value in that time, whether we call it an academic lab or something else, but they realize the students do benefit from that time. I think there's a reset needed for all of us, the teachers and administration, to understand the differences between Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions. The successes also in helping students to become better organized. The study skills piece was a big piece for that, for a lot of the students who took part in that. I want to go back to the second bullet, though, resetting for understanding, for our teachers to understand that they understood very clearly it's difficult to do a Tier 2 intervention in the structure that we had with academic labs. As noble and as with the greatest of intentions that we had for our teachers, it's a complicated and very difficult task. Reteaching and assessment opportunities, that was valued, very valuable for our students and for our teachers. And more refinement with Tier 3 interventions, math lab and reading strategies. I think we've gotten better. We have refined both of those programs for students. So the discussions and input, what we learned, that the valuable support time for students is needed. They need to have a time to receive that continued support. And the intentions of Tier 2 interventions complicated the academic lab period. And I say that because unless there's a more efficient way to do 6 schools and have a very targeted approach to the Tier 2 interventions with this multitude of students experiencing the lab, I can't see that happen. And there's a variety of ways that we can approach that. And I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. That less movement of our students was a good thing, that it kept their safe and orderly environment and their structure for fewer opportunities for behavior issues. School improvement. This also focused our teachers and our site administrations on the school improvement process. And streamlined to one day. The discussions with our teachers and sites that the one day was definitely appropriate and needed, but all the schools came to this conclusion. And wanted to call it an advisory period versus an academic lab, because they are getting a variety of information within that time frame. So recommendations and next steps: align the advisory period with the effective schools correlates. The work on that is already being done as we provide more opportunities for time on task. Align the AP, the advisory period, with Wednesday's PLC day. That was a decision made by the schools. I don't know why that bullet went there, but create in-class time for checking for understanding and use the time to intervene to reteach to those who didn't get it. As you may recall, we have increased the class periods from Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday to 60 minutes. So we want to create that Tier 1 intervention, checking for understanding during that time, because we will have the 60 minutes, and provide professional development on the best practices for checking for understanding at the secondary level. So at the elementary level, it's a common practice on what you, how you implement the checking for understanding as part of your lesson design. At the secondary level, we need to help our teachers understand a little bit more fully what that could mean and what that could look like. So as we implement the correlates of effective schools by Dr. Lazat, the three bulleted items are where we can really look at that advisory period time where it creates climate of high expectations for success because our teachers want that. It actually impacts all 7 of the correlates. It provides a clear and more focused opportunity for students to learn and be time to have that time on task with a level of specificity around the work that's needed to help them out and provide them that time for support. And it allows our teachers to monitor their progress throughout the day because the academic or the advisory period will be tied to that 3rd hour or 2nd hour, I misspoke, 2nd hour on Wednesdays for PLC days. That time also within that PLC period allows them to have their discussions during that afternoon for the professional learning communities on Wednesdays. I think that's it for questions.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Menville. I know we have questions. Who would like to start? Yeah. Member Hodge?
No, someone else can go ahead of me.
All right.
Collecting my thoughts.
Vice President Montero.
Thank you, Dr. Mendeville, for the presentation. I know we had talked quite a bit about this beforehand. I know when we were putting into the previous meeting. One question that I did have when you mentioned it, when you're talking about aligning the advisory period with the effective school correlates and those three correlates that were highlighted, what does that look like in practice?
Great question. What would that look like in practice? That's what we're going to be figuring out, actually. The last 3 times I've had with principals and their administrative teams, we've been talking about this, but among other procedures, processes, guidelines, and this is part of that discussion of how that's going to look. So and I'm thinking you're talking just about the advisory period and not the 60-minute checking for understanding, correct? I think that's what you're asking. Okay. So on Wednesdays, at the end of their 2nd period, their period would be extended for an additional 30 minutes. All students would remain in that homeroom. I'll call it a homeroom. And so there would be minimal movement of students across the campus. They stay with that teacher, and within that time frame, that teacher can check for an understanding, reteach, help kids with homework for an assignment. There's a variety of things that they can do in that time period. They can retest. Again, there's a variety of things that the teachers can do with their students. The other advantage that was mentioned is that the teachers then know their students within that time frame. And because in academic lab, you had kids from a variety of classes converging into one classroom, and there's the adult there who probably knew maybe 2 or 3 kids, and the other 27 were from other classrooms. So this gives the teacher an opportunity to focus on his or her students and what they need with that extra 30 minutes. Hence the frequent monitoring of student progress. And a lot of this is going to be designed also by the teachers and what they think they need for that extra time.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Vice President Montero. Member James?
All right, yes. So they're staying in their 2nd period for 30 minutes more, but
2nd hour, right?
yeah, if they need to retake a test in a different class. Like if my second period is PE, but I'm struggling in my math class, am I able to get a pass to go get help in math or to go retake a test that I failed? Because I feel like when Marcos took ACLAB and just integrated it into their classes or whatever, that was one of the things that was really hard, was not having a little bit of flexibility there. And so is that something that you are going to consider?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, Dr. Wilson, because we've talked
Yes,
about this.
Board Member James, great question. When we talked with the principals about this, what we think we're trying to be very proactive and keep a handle on student conduct during this time, because this was where, when we talk about the accountability and the movement, this was where things were happening. Because I may say I have an appointment somewhere, or so what they talked about doing was kind of slowly building to movement, was what we heard. They will be doing heavy planning around this summer. So probably in Q1, there's not a lot of movement. There was some student feedback about some great things that were shared about social emotional resources and things. Well, that was at the end. Maybe that's something that could be shown during that time in the beginning. We've talked about some things with the handbook during that time. So really that first month may be Tempe Union heavily structured, giving the schools time to really just coach everyone on their roles. And then what they saw was progressive movement. So am I going in kind of on Fridays, and I'm taking this from the school that actually has this in place that they shared during Think Tank. On Fridays, do students have options, and they're planning for the prior or the next Wednesday coming up? So I want to do ACT prep. I'm going to sign up for that and go to this location. I'm going to go work on FAFSA. I'm going to go over here. So there will be a variety of options. But what I think you'll see is the schools will build to that so that we have better structure in place and everyone's kind of clear on what the boundaries are during that time period.
that just sounds all sorts of educationally sound there, Dr. Wilson. I love it. Yeah, that sounds perfect. And I think that we have that need in the beginning of the school year to have that extra 30 minutes to build that community and so on. And we're not really retaking tests this first few weeks of school, hopefully. But I do want to see that movement being built into it as it progresses, because that was some feedback we got that was really, I think, useful, hearing how important that is. And keeping them in one place, it's like, okay, cool. If I just want to sit and catch up on my homework, I don't need to walk to another class. Love it. But if I need to make up a test, I'd love to have that opportunity as a student.
And, and thank you for asking that question, and thank you, Dr. Wilson, for the level of clarity. The other thing that I was envisioning is that I'd like to have this very teacher-driven. So, and it will vary from campus to campus, from classroom to classroom. So as they see their students and having a need, and rather than giving them this plethora of opportunities to do this, do that, let's focus on maybe the top 3 things where movement would be appropriate for them to go to class to make up this test, or go get very, very specific tutoring, or, you know, those very specific things to start. But I think we've got to do a gradual movement. My big priority, at least starting the next year, is to get back into protocol, behavior, structure, routine for students, and then let's move into the movement. You know, because all of that's important.
And so just to clarify, Marcos did their different, not ACLAB this past semester, but they're going to be on the same schedule as all the other schools now.
Right,
okay.
Right. Thank you.
Board members, any other thoughts, comments, or questions? So I have one that I'm curious about. Dr. Mendel, you mentioned that some of the challenges, granted they're different for each school, but they have varied from 1 to 4 days a week, and kind of, from my understanding, streamlining it to 1 day, and that essentially all schools came to this conclusion. When you say all schools, how are you defining that? And the reason I'm asking is because from feedback from students and teachers, ones that are used to having it more than one has still found it very helpful. And so I want to be cognizant of their own thoughts as to how it will impact them, either in a positive or negative manner, but how it's going to be explained or illustrated to them that this is something that will also be beneficial, rather than viewing it as it means that it would be that we're taking away something.
No, excellent question. The school in question, and I'll give this just candidly, is that we were looking at equitable time for instruction at each of our schools. Every school should have maximum opportunities of instructional minutes. And that particular school, Tempe High, had the least amount of instructional minutes compared to the other schools. So and that's one of the schools that had 4 academic lab periods. So that when you add a lab to your week, you're taking away from instructional minutes from each of your classes. So when I say all 6 schools, while I don't know that they struggled, but they were trying to understand, okay, why can't we do 2, or why can't we do 1 or 3 or whatever, when they realize, okay, this is going to actually be more equitable in terms of 60 instructional minutes for each period, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Within that time frame, we're going to build in a natural opportunity for teachers to do a simple check for understanding. Therefore, that tier 1, in a perfect world, the tier 1 support that teachers provide can be very targeted within that time frame. The goal, if that's done properly, is that you reduce the time that kids actually need for any sort of lab intervention, and certainly 4. But I think the school and that particular team realized, yeah, we need more instructional time during the week consistently.
No, that's helpful. Thank you, Dr. Menville. So looking and connecting it, because obviously we'll have, or I guess the recommendation is to have 60 minutes of instruction, particularly for tier 1 intervention. And obviously that's the preventative, proactive piece. And I apologize if you addressed this earlier, but I was furiously taking notes. How are you integrating the tier 2 and 3 interventions, or I envision in doing so?
So let me respond with probably a different way. Tier 1 interventions, teaching and learning, do you want to take that? Because teaching and learning are working on that.
Sure. President Garcia, members of the governing board, and Superintendent Mendeville. That was a great question. And even to extend a little bit and to support what Dr. Mendeville was just speaking about, one of our schools, Tempe High, had the 4 days, and I'm going to share this information and then go into tier 1, 2, and 3. Yet their kids, there is those challenges of getting kids to where they should be for the intervention. By having the 60 minutes, you provide for equity across the district in terms of instructional learning time, but also you keep your kids, and if teachers check for understanding for every single learning target that's going on in that classroom that day, they can pull those students back to their desk, whatever, and to provide an intervention in real time for the students. That is the goal of every tier 1. What you hope for is that you catch those kids in the tier 1 so that they don't escalate and need a tier 2 or need a tier 3 intervention. A tier 2 could be that your PLC is, when they meet once a week, they should be looking at student data every single week and looking at students by learning target and saying, this is where we need to target certain kids. They can do that before school, they can do that after school, or within their classroom time saying, you know what, we need to reset, refocus, reteach these certain learning targets because kids aren't gathering them. So that will happen in that manner. It could also happen in that advisory period where they're doing some extra targeted support by each school. Tier 3, that's really, your kids need intensive support. Those are your kids that are beyond 2 years in their reading ability. Their math ability might be in 6th grade rather than in a 9th grade. So you're targeting that with an extra period of a reading strategy or your math labs, and you're doing that. We also have the peer-to-peer tutoring. So we have a magnitude of tutoring opportunities for kids that go in throughout the night with our National Honor Society kids that are working with them. Brian Johnson is coordinating all of those tutoring activities. So you see that Tier 3 support that's also provided that extends beyond the classroom day.
Thank you, Mrs. Silgers. I'm going to add to that because the Tier 3, there are assessments for those students to be properly placed so they have the proper instruction within that Tier 3 structure. The goal is that they're not staying in that lab, you know, the math lab or the reading labs. We want to get them out so they can get back into their classrooms and receive the instruction like every other kid with the proper kinds of support. I think with a more defined use for our PLCs in determining what Tier 2 strategies are working for certain classes, because we have to learn from one another, because there's some teachers that are doing phenomenal things that we just need to learn from and put into practice in other settings, that will improve that targeted smaller group support that they get in a Tier 2 opportunity.
No, thank you all for that, the explanations and thoughtful responses. And the reason I'm asking is because when I think about equitable, and I'm glad that we're addressing kind of the classroom to classroom piece and how that's taking away time, and you know that's not really being optimized across all schools. But then I look at it as a deeper layer to that in terms of the timing with each intervention. And so by what I mean by that is, you know, granted DV is going to have way more Tier 1 than, let's say, Tempe High, and how we've identified that. And so when we're looking at this data, how we broken it down even further as to the different tiers for each school and where those additional layers of support are needed. So that, because from what I'm understanding is the majority of the focus emphasis is Tier 1, so we're catching every student. And those who don't, that net catches them at each additional layer, right? And so I guess my question is, how are we breaking the equitable time to make sure that the ones that we're not catching in the Tier 1 and we're getting in the Tier 2 and 3, is that time equitable and conducive to their own progress?
Dr. Mandeville, would you like for me to?
Go ahead first, because I'll respond to it. I just didn't know where that thought
We have
was.
lots of great questions tonight. Thank you. One of the things that we are going to be doing is our multi-tiered system of support teams are going to be meeting. And so there's a big picture of how all these people who are a member of this team, what they do in relation to one another, what their roles and responsibilities are. Every single week, that team should be coming together, or every other week coming together, looking at those students who are on the early warning list, taking a look at what are the reasons why they're on these early warning lists. Are their behavior? Are they social emotional? Is it that they're failing classes? Why is it? And that team then identifies the supports that those students need. What we should be able to see is from the data from each site is which students are on the early warning list every single week, when the team met, what the supports that the students receive from that. We'll be able to see by the supports, if it's a Tier 2, Tier 3, or a Tier 1 support that those students are going to get. So we should be able to gather that information next school year.
So thank you for saying that, because that was part of what I was going to respond with, because one of the reasons we are putting an immense amount of resources toward the MTSS teams is just for that, if it's done properly. And we have the MTSS, we put greater focus, and I think we do a fairly good job with the social emotional and that piece. I mean, we can always improve upon that. It's the academic piece that we need to do a better job in. And so I think with the reset that we are planning this year, I've been very clear with the expectations that I have for our MTSS teams, their roles, those individuals that are hired within those teams, from your dean of students to your dropout prevention counselor, your counselors, all those team members have a very specific role that they need to operate in a cohesive manner on behalf of these kids. And so these kids who need that little extra attention, targeted attention, through the support and recommendations from their teachers in the PLCs, we can then funnel the support to them that they actually need, that's beyond the Tier 1 interventions that we hope will be happening within the classroom periods.
Just to President Garcia's example, I also just want to add that Tempe High, McClintock, Marcos, and Mountain Point receive additional Title I support. So to your example that you shared, they're going to have things like Summer Bridge, the reading strategies, the math labs, anticipating that gap that you're speaking of. So those would be the additional pieces to catch that, just for the example that you shared.
Great information, Dr.
Yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate that. All right, I don't have any additional questions. Board members? Member Hodge, Vice President Montero? All right. Hearing none, we will continue on with the,
Action.
Would like to vote yes. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it, Dr. Mendeville. I just wanted to make sure that I had the accurate language here, Dr. Mendeville. And for board members, this is that the governing board accept that the superintendent has successfully met his second semester goal for the fiscal year 21-22, and approve fully executing the terms and the addendum to his contract. So I move approval of I-3. May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
I second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Great. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have I-4, Superintendent's 2022-2023 budget recommendation. Dr. Mendeville.
Thank you, President Garcia, Vice President Montero, members of the board, executive team members, and our viewing and listening audience. This is going to be a duplicate of what you saw earlier with far greater detail from Mrs. Muhlmans and from Mr. Brown. But the budget recommendations, as I indicated earlier from the Bach committee, I do accept. So we'll go over as a superintendent's recommendation. I don't want to take too much time with this because it mirrors almost identically what you saw earlier. But I take pride in the budget advisory committee process and the fact that we've added additional members so that there's greater inclusivity and involvement and a collaborative model. They're good thinkers. They're not afraid to express their opinions, but there's always the good for the cause group, as our teachers demonstrated yet again in recommending the $2 for our hourly employees. Again, the committee members, the various meetings that Bach has met and that will continue to meet based on where the legislative body lands with their additional revenue recommendations from a state level. I'm not going to get too excited, but I'm hopeful that there will be some leeway and additional resources there. But going back to the projected revenues, I think Mrs. Muhlmans and her team did a thoughtful review and examination, particularly as I believe we talked about ongoing budget capacity as it relates to our carryover dollars, and she did a brilliant job in determining what could be considered ongoing budget capacity to be included with our budget. So I thank you, Mrs. Muhlmans. Do you remember that conversation we had? So, but in typical fashion, realizing the various revenue sources that we can count on, knowing that we have budget commitments. To Mrs. Muhlman's point, the ASRS retirement rate is going to go up next year, so we'll enjoy this $140,000 capacity that will be very easily removed next year. But our medical insurance, to your point, President Garcia, we are in a district that really values our folks. So having as an employer, being able to say that we pay our employee premiums, those who are eligible for insurance, is a big plus in being a member of this Tempe Union family. The Fine Arts Coordinator and the Tempe Union Online are noteworthy. I think those are going to be great additions to our team as we improve our position and quality program within the fine arts. I want to comment a little bit on the Tempe Union Online Coordinator, and President Garcia, you noted that it really is our 7th school. Now, we, in years past prior to the pandemic, may have had 20, 30, 80 kids in Tempe Union Online at any given period, so it was a very low amount. In the pandemic, that ballooned to over 1,000 students, and we today, with being in school in person this entire year, we still have a large number of students, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it about 600 full-time? It's a lot of students. It's far more than what we've had in prior years, but I think it's around that 400 to 600 full-time students. Looking and continuing with the budget compensation and realizing that we have M&O funds and other funding to do these items with step movement, which is very critical with our employee base, both our classified, certified, and administrative teams. To do that step is important to them, so that's a good thing. I love the fact that we have added the $2 on each of our cells for our hourly folks, and then the $2,000 for the instruction and student support, to that total of $3.8 million. And looking at the position stipends, knowing that we have restricted use of funds, but adding that administrative assistant back is a wonderful thing. We could be more efficient in their work and their time. In light of the Texas tragedy, that daytime surveillance position is critical in my eyes, so I'm glad that the committee approved that. The Dean of Students, all 6 will have that. Of course, the EL will support Mr. Brown with that big ask. But also so that we are in a position with our Tempe Union Online with the level of accuracy in reporting so that we receive full funding. This is a position that is going to help us in that manner. Our security officers, our Safe Talk trainers, to recognize our teachers and providing them a stipend for that training to the tune of $703,000 with these items. Continuing on with our budget projected, our revenue sources for M&O, the $4.9 million, commitments to $454 and change. The salary increases that were proposed in the presentation earlier, and then the position stipends with that remainder dollar amount of $128,000 plus. I'm pleased that we are looking at carryover dollars. I'm pleased with the classroom site fund. There are known restrictions with those funds that they go to defined certificated staff. So I'm glad that we worked out those details and providing them their longevity and having equity within some of those areas, those who are on the end of the salary schedules. So I appreciate that work there. I love the fact that we've done the recruitment and retention stipend for our teachers and instructional support to the tune of $3,000. Albeit it's one-time money. Hopefully next year we can still have one-time money. My concern always when we're looking at our budget, especially in a district that is gradually losing students, so our ADM is going down from year to year. We don't see the significant dips that some of our sister districts are experiencing, so we have a little bit more of an advantage to plan for funding and that kind of a thing. So this is, in my opinion, very thoughtful and generous, but putting our employees first. So $5.281 million. And then putting the rounded number of $4,000 from their performance pay on each of the cells for our teachers and those qualifying student services coordinators and our teachers, I think is a good measure. They're doing the work anyway. I think it's a good thing for them to have that just on their salary schedule. They receive the money throughout the year rather than one lump sum at the end of the year. The discontinuance, to just reiterate from Mrs. Muehlman's, that's not removing or eliminating the performance, pay for performance program that's required by statute. We're just going to revise that. And of course, we will involve our teachers to make sure that we're doing something. I'm positive that the inclusion of professional development, targeted professional development that is directly in line with our district's goals and strategic plan will be welcomed. So I'm glad to see this. And I'm especially thankful that we are at the top of the pay scale for the Maricopa County, at least for our sister districts that are our greatest competitors. So I think this is a very wise, thoughtful, prudent, generous. There are a lot of ways I can describe this budget recommendation in light of the fact we still have some unknown knowledge out there from the legislature. I think this is an excellent proposal created and given by the Budget Advisory Committee. I do recommend to you as the board to approve the superintendent's budget recommendation, my recommendation for the next school year of 22-23.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mendeville. So you briefly mentioned that they're nearly identical, but everything else is identical, absent the font and one additional slide. Is there anything that, sorry, I really stick onto.
He does have an eye for detail, doesn't he?
So just wanted to clarify that there's nothing, it is, okay, reflective of the committee recommendation. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Board members, any thoughts, comments, questions? And none from here. Folks on the phone?
No.
Nope. All right. In that case, I move approval of I-4. May I have a second, please?
I second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Next, we have J1, informational report through May 16, 2022. Please keep in mind this is for information only. And finally, we are at communications from governing board members. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first because I'm going to go really quick.
All right, Member Hodge.
I just want to wish everybody a happy beginning of Pride Month. Also, Juneteenth is coming up on June 16th. Corona had a phenomenal graduation. Thank you to all our principals for putting on a phenomenal graduation at every school. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the couple of weeks until I see you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Hodge. Vice President Montero?
Sure, I can go. I'll keep it brief again just for time, but I want to echo what Member Hodge said and wish everyone a happy Pride Month, and just reflecting on the resolution that we passed back in April, which I think was a historic resolution, and glad that we have a district that cares for each and every one of our students, and our goal is making our schools a safe space for all of our students and staff. So I wanted to thank the district for all their work, especially Mr. McDonald, and I'm looking forward to continuing that work and adopting some policy to make sure that we keep our LGBTQ+ students safe and secure in our schools. And just lastly, just wanted to say, because we haven't met since graduation, just wanted to say congratulations to all of our graduates, and I hope everyone has a good summer.
Thank you so much, Vice President Montero. Member Braza?
Yes, I attended Marco Zanisa graduation. I got the opportunity to hand my nephew his diploma along with some of my Little League team members that I coached before they were in high school. I also attended Success University's graduation. It was the first graduation they've had. It's going to be an incredible program. I'm looking forward to multiple graduations and the growth of the program. It helps students, with special needs work towards getting career-oriented, working into the, helping them develop skills, career skills, and get them onto the next step with support from their community. The other thing I just want to say is I thank you to the district. I always ask for books whenever you guys issue books to staff members. One that was in my mailbox was The Outward Mindset. Really appreciate that. What it really taught me was what you're trying to do as a district, Dr. Medeville and your team, and looking at how you cannot, we're so focused on changing behaviors, and behavior, you can't change behaviors and get the results that we're looking for if we're focused primarily on behaviors instead of mindset. So if behaviors drive results and the mindset, what the book really conveyed was that mindset informs which behaviors the person chooses to be. So for example, they give multiple examples in the book. One, law enforcement officer, the special tactics team. Long story short, after the operation, one of the members handed a baby a bottle and made sure the babies had bottles. And that was not a behavioral change. That was a mindset change that the leader of that squad made sure that the individuals that are a part of that team have a mindset of community and working towards identifying what is needed in terms of that community. It's a way of driving our behaviors. So this, the SWAT team in that instance didn't teach that how to make formula, to teach that you have to go to the baby. It was a mindset that was instilled by the team. And this works in many organizations, and thank you for the book. I really appreciate it. I think, we focus so much on trying to change people's behaviors and say, you have to do it this way, do it this way, do it this way, but what we really have to do is change the mindset so they can identify students that are in need and address it through that scope of lens. I think we can't train every scenario, so being able to train the mindset of what we stand for is really ultimately at the goal of everything we do in terms of achievement and disciplinary aspects and really mitigating unconscious biases. So thank you for that book. I'm looking forward to the next book that I have. I can't remember the name, but Kim Hilgers, she gave it to me, and I'm looking forward to it. It's about leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Braza. Member James?
Happy Pride Month. Yeah. And to echo what Vice President Montero said, it was a really exciting day just looking back at the impact that the resolution had and just listening to, saw on Facebook the clip of Dr. Mendeville introducing it and just backing it so strongly. And it just was really, I was really proud today to wake up and be like, my district is the best, is making students and staff in our community feel like they have a home and belong. And I'm really proud. And yeah, I attended Desert Vista's graduation. It was so much fun to be back there with Dr. Wilson. And we got our selfie game on. Megan, I hope you got our cute selfie. We did it. But it was a fabulous graduation. It was exciting to be back on that campus. And yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you, Member James. Similarly, want to congratulate and wish everyone happy graduation and happy summer. Hope everyone's relaxing. Really quick, got to go to McClintock Spring Play, the senior solo and the choir concert, particularly because it's the alumni one, where all the alum come back and get to perform with the current students, so that's always special. The Marcos Teniza art show with Member Hodge, Member Braza, and Member James, and then went over to the Native graduation right next door. That was really fun. And then we had a Compiler Innovation Academy reception here at the district office with Member James, that one. And similarly want to wish everyone happy Pride. Normally we hold the Pride Festival in June, but because it's so hot, it's now in October. So be celebrating that again. Well, that one is, yeah. Shout out to Member James' shirt. Leveling up here. But no, thank you to the district. It was really powerful reflecting today and just knowing how impactful it is to not only us, but to the community at large. We know that there's always a lot of work into that, and certainly it takes a lot of reflection and feedback and input into that. So Mr. McDonald, Dr. Mendeville, and Dr. Wilson, I know y'all are always have that at the forefront of your thoughts and analysis. Also, just want to say Happy Immigrant Heritage Month as well. Lots of things to celebrate this month. And also, on a personal note, just thank you to folks who have reached out with respect to my dad's 3-year passing from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. That was 3 years ago, right around the same time with the budget, and was very overwhelming, and don't know how I got through that, but just wanted to thank everyone during that time and everyone who's reached out since. Very, very meaningful. Having said that, nothing else to add. Dr. Mendeville, anything from you or the executive team?
Just as a reminder to you all that I will be out of the country from June 4th to the 21st. So Dr. Wilson will be in charge along with the other executive team members. You're going to be in good hands. But I will, and my telephone service and text service and all that will be active.
No.
So in the event that I am needed, but just to be reminded, I leave on Saturday and I will return on the 21st that evening in time for our June 22nd board meeting. So I'm looking forward to the time.
Dr. Mendeville, everything will be okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, just checking. Our next regular meeting is June 22nd, 2022. I'm sorry, we just went back here. I move to adjourn. May I have a second?
I second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. I'm going to count that as a 4. 4-0-1. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.